So we were just kind of chatting, and then it just cut out. And she was just sat there, and I could see it on my phone, and she was just like, I hope Hannah comes back soon. I hope that, because I don't know what I'm doing. And she couldn't close it because obviously she was like a guest on it, so she couldn't end the broadcast. And she was just chatting about, yeah. And what had actually happened was it's quite an old building, it's a Victorian building, and we didn't realise that when they had done the extension of the conservatory out the back, they'd had a light against this wall right here is an external wall. So it was the other side of that. And they put a light switch, but then when they'd taken the conservatory away, they hadn't actually removed the light switch. So for the last 23 years, there has been a light switch on an exterior wall with no protection other than a bit of plastic. The plastic has worn away, and the reason my internet cut out is because there was a small explosion attached to my house.
Fun.
So that was fun. So I was like, oh, that's why the internet keeps dying. That makes sense. But yes, morning, people. I'm not awake yet. I hope you guys are.
I hope people feel more prepared for this than we are.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking the other day, I was like, this is the only one where it's at a reasonable hour for Australia, but nowhere else. But yeah, no, that's cool. Because I like, when I watch live streams, I really prefer the morning ones because I like to just sit and have some like ambient chat whilst I'm reading. But I tend to host evening ones because I'm more awake then.
Yeah, I tend to do like pretty late night ones because if it's for a book or anything, there's usually an American person who needs us to bump it right into the later hours so that they're awake.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. Are you looking forward to the clocks going back tomorrow? I had to think about it then. You think extra hour in bed tomorrow?
I should be. In fact, it's pretty perfectly timed because I keep not sleeping until like 3 a.m. and I don't know why. So I'm just like, this could be good.
Yeah, because then it's only like 2 a.m. So you're like, that's fine.
I don't even know why it's happened. Like, it's not because I can't sleep. Like, I'm not restless. I'm just wide awake all of a sudden. I'm like, why?
It's those spooky vibes and just keeping you awake and stuff like that. I think I love it when it rains at night because I feel like I'm both wired and soothed, and just kind of I find that very, very cathartic. But having said that, I'm trying to like wake myself up. So I've had a really big cup of tea, and then I've brought a snack for this morning. And I don't want to like munch whilst we're chatting, but I will munch whilst we're eating. I've got popping candy chocolate orange.
Amazing.
So I'm a child. I was like, I'll enjoy that later.
I'm going to grab a snack, but I should have a big old cup of coffee.
That was smart. So the last couple I've had like a really big tea, and then like the last 10 to 20 minutes of the live stream I've been really desperate for the bathroom, and I didn't want to be like, right, it's near the end, we're going to end it early, or been like, it's near the end, I'm just going to go, you entertain yourself for 20 minutes. So I was like, I'm going to prepare, like, yeah. So I've been, and I've just got water now because it's safe. I'm an old lady, so I just have to respect the old lady body.
I'm used to doing the flash spiel by now, so I feel like I've trained my bladder to like last the length of a live show.
Behave, yeah. I like that. Well, I mean, how did you fare with because like I was talking to Gavin about your 8-hour live stream that you did for their birthday.
God.
That was honestly I said to Gavin, I was like, I was drinking alongside you guys. It was so long that I was sober by the end of it again. I love that.
I think I was, to be fair, because I just stopped at one point and I was like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But we kept having to take it in turns to go on toilet trips.
I was like, no. Well, Gavin didn't even wait his turn. He just took the laptop with him, and you were just like, right, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not doing that.
Oh God, it was something. I didn't even realize he'd moved, and then I was like, why do you have toilet roll next to you?
It was so subtly done. But also, like, if you were like, I watched it back a couple of weeks ago because I just like I said, I like having the ambient, and the laughter between you three is so lovely that I'm just like, yeah, I'm gonna have that. And you can see his little smug face when he knows what he's doing, and he just gets up and walks away. I love that. But yeah, I I'm obsessed with all of your content as well. So I don't want you to think that this is that I'm talking about Gavin a lot. I love you as well.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So we were chatting the other day on Instagram, or was it Twitter? I can't remember. When we were talking about the hypotheticals, and I set you a challenge of coming up with some gothic fiction hypotheticals, and I was going to come up with some for you as well. And what I said to you off screen is that I've got 3, and they're all related to husbands we don't have. So I figured that way it's nice and safe, but they're all a little bit different. And you said you have ghosty ones for me.
Yeah, I think most of them are. At least 3 out of 4 are related to death. So.
Death. Amazing. So did you want to start with one of your hypotheticals, or did you want me to challenge you with one of mine?
We could start with one of mine, because the first one I have is like, I feel like you can get this like online or something. I've heard it before, so it'd be like not an easy one, but a standard one to start with.
Yeah. Ease us in gently as opposed to straight into the death.
Although it is.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so would you rather know the exact date and time of when you were going to die, or know how you were going to die?
See, that's really tricky, because I don't want to know, because I think I'm the kind of person where if I know I have a deadline, and I'm not talking about like a deadline in particular, I mean like work-wise, I am really good for either prepping miles in advance of it. So for uni, I was really good for like my essays were all handed in 3 weeks in advance, because I knew that on the day, if people were trying to print stuff out, it was just going to be an absolute nightmare. So if I know the time and place, that's going to be, do I prep? But if I know how I die, I'm going to spend the whole time worrying and like almost actively avoiding that thing, which, as we've seen from many horror films, trying to avoid your fate tends to land you in your fate anyway. So I feel like if I knew how I was going to die, I'd end up bringing it would be more abrupt, because then I'd be like actively avoiding it. So like if I knew I was going to drown, I'd be like, right, I'm avoiding all water, and then one day I'm having a sip of tea and it goes down the wrong way, and then that's it. You know, like it's like that's how fate gets you. I think so I think I'd rather know time and place than how. I think. What about you?
Probably the same, because it's just like you would quite literally see death everywhere if you knew how it was, because there's no specification for how specific it is either. So it's just like, if they say you die by getting hit by a car, I'm not going outside ever again. I'm just like, I don't know when. Could be tomorrow. Whereas if it's time and place and everything, then you kind of can at least be calm that today's fine.
Yeah. I've got another 6 years. It's okay. I've got time. I can still get the book published that I want to publish. I can still go on that holiday that I want to go on. And then the last 2 weeks, I can just have an existential crisis and everything will be fine.
Start seeing everything as a death omen at that point.
Yeah. You're like, oh, how? Yeah. But at least it's only 2 weeks of stress as opposed to, constant life of stress.
Yeah.
I like that one. That's a good one. That's an interesting one. Okay, mine are not like that at all. They're very, very specific. So your new husband has been married before. Would you rather she was alive and haunting you, or dead and you're constantly being compared to her? They're very specific books I'm referencing there.
Oh, see, that's hard purely because I'm not the sort to like deal with that, so I just feel like, wow.
Well, we're not married anymore.
What do you mean, like alive and haunting me?
So I was thinking kind of Jane Eyre, where he's got the wife that's like setting fire to your bedroom and kind of like almost gaslighting you, and then you find out that not only was he married before, he wasn't actually divorced, you know, like that she's still hanging about.
Ooh, oh. I'm trying to like think of myself as the character you're referencing. Like, do I want to be Jane or do I want to be Rebecca?
Yeah.
Well, not Rebecca, the unnamed version of. Oh god. Is the reason why she's not around anymore the same?
Well, I guess this is the thing. So I wanted to go for like both of those books have terrible husbands, first and foremost, carrying big secrets and are completely selfish with their equally very young, naive wives. And also, you don't get a nice house with either of them because both of their big houses burn. So
True.
You just have to decide, is he an asshole because he married someone who was from the West Indies, brought her to England, and then she went mad, but she wasn't mad, she was just being herself, or killed her for being herself? Those are your options. That's what I mean. Like, they're very hyper specific, so they're not as I don't think they're as easy to answer when they're that, you know.
I'm really struggling.
I think you're right. I think that you go with the third option of being I'm out, because the more I think about it, there's obviously the bit in Jane Eyre where she like hears him calling her and she like goes running back. I'd be like, I need to move further away. I can still hear him. And then there's a bit in Rebecca where like she obviously is getting compared. It's the white dress scene, and I think when he has a go at her, I'd be like, no, I'm out, because you could have told me. You could have given me the info. You could have helped me. This lady is obviously out to get me. I'm an adult. I don't need to be compared to anyone. Thank you.
I'm just like, almost which is more cruel, keeping them alive and just like trapped, or
yeah.
I will go with Dead but Compared.
Fair enough.
Expect lots of arguments. Because I can't, like, if it's due to him that they're still around and haunting me, I would find that terrifying if they're literally just lurking. Like,
yeah. It's a bit of a Bluebeard moment, isn't it? You're like, this isn't okay. This bodes well for us. No.
Whereas if I know and suspect that he's murdered them, then I can put up precautions against that and make sure I don't follow the same fate.
Yeah. Getting rid of housekeepers will be the first step for me. Don't need them.
What would you go for?
I would probably. I think I would agree with you. I think if I found out that he had a wife that he was keeping around, but also the fact that he's like locked her away and what have you, and told everyone that she had died, that's a bigger crime, I think, than in a moment of passion killing her and then finding out you were manipulated.
And it's like a lot more covering up as well. Like, it's even more manipulation and hiding, because you're literally trying to hide a live person, which is considerably more difficult than a dead body.
Do you know this from personal experience, Ashley? Is there something you need to tell us? Yeah, no. I love that. Yeah, and I think, I mean, to be fair, like, I always think I was thinking the other day, like, about like the romance genre stemming from Gothic fiction and things like that, and I'm like, but the romances in Gothic fiction are horrible. Like, they're not relationship goals at the very least. Like, yeah.
I always feel the need to like disclaimer myself whenever I say like romantic Gothic, so I'm like, it's not romance as in like love, it's romance as in like everything's all fantasized, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Extreme heightened emotion and
I always it's interesting studying literature when you also do booktube, because it's like certain words just mean completely different things. Like contemporary, that's not a genre, it's a time period. So it's really, I always have to disclaimer myself by which version I'm using. It's strange.
Yeah, no, that was something when I first started watching booktube and they kept saying contemporary, and I was like, but I don't read contemporary. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But then I don't know what genre I would call kind of like the modern literature of today, because I'm living it. So it's not going to have a title for another 30 years when someone's looking back on that kind of 90s drama that I grew up reading. Like, I was watching a video the other day that was talking about 90s films and how they're kind of referred to now, so a very specific genre, as cubicle films, essentially because they're all set in an office, because pre 9/11, like nothing was happening, and the world was pretty much the normal that everyone refers to of what will go back to normal one day is this kind of 5-year period in the 90s where we hadn't had a credit crash, we hadn't had 9/11, we hadn't had all this drama, and so people were far more, the conflict was far more internalized, so a lot of the films start off internalized, and it's really fascinating to think that really wasn't that long ago, and so much has changed. So what genre title do we think it will be in 5 years' time when they refer to this period of time? And I can only assume it'll be Hellscape, because let's be honest.
Oh, I always think, like, what? I just feel sorry for all of the future history students who have to answer questions just like, in what way did Boris Johnson contribute to all of these things that happened in 2021? And I'm like, oh, you poor soul.
Yeah.
Funny.
It makes me think of I can never remember names in politics, but the guy who came back from visiting Adolf Hitler and was like, "Oh, I have this treaty, everything's fine now," and then like literally the day he landed, Hitler invaded Poland, and I feel like that kind of, were you an idiot? Like, were you an idiot? Is how people are going to look at politics today and just be like, no. But I literally, so last night I finished reading Superior by Angela Saini, and I thought it was going to be kind of a breakdown of what racism is and like where it comes from. But it kind of talks about racism in like, I thought it'd be quite political. It's not. It's social science, biology, and like that kind of way. And it's really fascinating because she kind of goes through all these different stages of history where what is happening today has happened so many times before with different variations of racism. And there's a really powerful quote where she says, it's not the thugs with the tattoos and the violence that you need to worry about. It's not those racists. It's the racists that are dressed as scholars and scientists because they're telling you there's evidence and there is none. Like, and it's that kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, it was one of those horrible things where like I can see history repeating itself. And reading this book, I was like, oh yeah, like we should have known that this was going to happen because it's happened so many times before. It shouldn't happen because we should be more civilized. But the whole point is we always think we're more civilized than others, and that's just not the case. So yeah, it's really fascinating.
And it's like, is it phrenology? The one where they like said that it's based in skull shape and how straight your forehead is, and that's the reason why so many racist issues come from appearance, because it's just like your skull is the wrong shape, you haven't evolved enough, and I'm just like, that was apparently science.
But this is the thing, and it's yeah, she goes into that. She talks about like Neanderthals and looking at Neanderthal skulls and then comparing them. And she said, but the problem is there were other factors that weren't taken into consideration when that experiment was done. So, for example, the fact that when we went to Australia and said, oh, you people won't survive out here, we'll do you the favor of just slaughtering all of you and then giving you a better society, and then going, oh, it's really weird that these very small group of people that we've not seen before have these skulls very similar to Neanderthals when we discovered them in like the Amazon and stuff. Because yeah, we'd already slaughtered everyone to go, well, actually, this is the aesthetic we would like. So anything that's not that, and then people going, oh yeah, well, of course that you're going to have, because we subjugated those people. So of course, like, and it's the idea that intelligence is related to your ethnicity and things like that. And it's like, well, of course, if we subjugated people for 400 years, they're not going to have had the funds and the experiences that we had, and therefore their intelligence is going to be affected. It's not that they're stupid, it's that they weren't given the opportunities, and then it's perpetuated of, oh well, yeah, well, they're stupid and stuff, and it's not true. It's just this it's a scientific lie that has then been politicized. It was fascinating. I would definitely recommend. I found it really dense, so I listened to the audiobook and was just like, this is amazing.
I do have the ebook on my Kindle. But yeah, it's that thing where it's like, when it comes to science, obviously it's done wonderful things, but it is like in relation to the scientist, because if you set out with a purpose to prove something, you will likely prove it. no matter what it is, if you go in with the intention of saying this is true, and that's like,
yeah, I'm looking for this, I'm hoping to find this in the data, you will find it in the data. Yeah, it's so true. And it's dangerous, it's really dangerous, because it's not just asking a question. And I think that's why I have a lot of respect for like peer review systems that kind of go, okay, but you haven't taken into consideration these things. I think that's really, really important, because yeah, it's so dangerous to be like, oh well, we've done this one experiment. I mean, even Mendel's genetics experiment, he bred a whole bunch of peas, and then he bred them for 5 years so that he could only get yellow and green peas. He bred out all the other colours, so it was just those two. And then he worked out that actually you could almost, after he'd done that, he then did the experiment to work out which colour they would come out if you bred them together, and how you could determine essentially if someone was going to be born with blue eyes or brown eyes from that comparison. Except when it was done in real life and farmers were trying to replicate it, they couldn't, because they hadn't spent 5 years breeding one specific type of pea. And it's those kind of things where it's like, okay, yes, you can do this experiment, but it's flawed even before you start, because you're not taking into consideration all these other factors. And then
in These Violent Delights, which is a Dark Academia book that I've just read, one of the very first conversations in that book, they're doing sciences, but there's ethical science, and they have this whole conversation about how you can never present a completely neutral experiment, because even if everybody's agreeing, like in terms of ethics, obviously the candidates have to agree to do it and stuff, but just them knowing that they're doing an experiment of some sort will influence the results, because they're going to be prepared differently, whereas you can't not tell them, because that's not ethical.
Yeah.
And they were just having this whole conversation about it, and I'm like, everything is like this. Even in literature studies, you go into it knowing that you are looking for a specific thing, therefore that's your bias when you're writing an essay, because you're looking for it, and you might not have seen it otherwise, or it might have presented a completely different argument otherwise. And it's weird how it all connects, because quite often it's just like humanities versus science, and I'm like, no, there's quite a lot.
There's a bridge, yeah, and there has to be, because I think yeah, with conscious science and ethical science, I think it is really, really important, because we're human beings and we're all going to have different experiences, and we're all going to bring different, like two scientists could do the same experiment and have a different perspective or a different hypothesis going in, and then a different result coming out of it. So I think, yeah, it's did you ever study psychology at like school or A level or anything like that?
No, but I've done it through literature. It was like one of the theories applied, I guess. Yeah, it is weird doing it through a book.
No, that's fair. We did so I did A level, well, I did AS level, because I was at a grammar school where I did chemistry, biology, maths and psychology, and I only passed psychology. So I then went to a different school and did subjects I'm actually good at. But I was off sick one of the lessons, and then the following lesson there was a test, and basically we used to do like a random experiment every Friday. So we kind of knew going in that there was going to be an experiment on Friday, but we never knew what it was going to be. And I had been away excuse me, the previous week, and all I was told that it was going to be a personality test. And essentially my teacher would hold up 3 lines on a card, and you had to say which line was the longest, and some of them were really, really close, so you'd have to like spend some time thinking about it. But she would go around the whole room, there's about 13 of us, go around, and everyone would have to say which line was the longest. Except the experiment is rigged so that only one person is being experimented on. So she would tell you like before they went in, and they just like, this is the thing, so I was ill, so they were like, right, if Hannah's back next week we'll do this one in particular. So the first 3 people will say the right answer, the next 3 people will say whatever the third person said, whether it's right or wrong, and then it goes around. And then you see, because you'll notice if people all say the same line, people stop paying attention because they're saying, oh well, it must be that one, and they just kind of fall into that category. And I got really annoyed, because as it was coming round, I could see that people were picking the wrong answer. And I was like, no, this is the right answer. Like assuming that it would be something on a basis of, you know, you get so many right answers and it determines this about you. and actually it was a type A or type B personality test. And essentially, if you just go along with the crowd, you're a type B personality, because you're like, oh, well, they must be correct because they've picked that already. Maybe I'm the one that's wrong. There are outside factors that I need to consider. And the type A personality is, no, it's my responsibility to get it correct. So I was sat there getting really frustrated because I was like, no, it's obviously this. And she said that I was the first student that had got angry at the experiment, because afterwards she was like, oh, Hannah, you're a type A, but like the experiment was on you. And I was like, oh, I was genuinely getting annoyed with my class for not putting any of it in.
You're just like, you're all idiots.
Yeah, I was like, come on, guys, it's obviously B. What are you talking about? Yeah.
I love how we've got on such a tangent from which husband would you rather have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got more. So my next would you rather is another husband one. Well, they're all husband ones, but another which husband would you prefer? So you find out that your husband is a monster of the night. Which would you prefer, an incubus or a poltergeist?
Oh, an incubus. I feel like it'd be more fun.
Yeah, fair enough. I didn't want to go classic vampire werewolf. I was like, that she'll be expecting that. And I was like, yeah, incubus or poltergeist. Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair choice.
The poltergeist would just scare me. And like, there's no, you won't be able to have that like connection, you know. Whereas
connection,
you would definitely have it with an incubus.
That's true. Well, my thought, I went very domestic. I didn't go down that road, but fair enough. I was thinking more like, okay, well, an incubus can actually have a day job, whereas a poltergeist, if they're haunting an object, fine, they can probably be moved around. But if they're haunting a building, am I paying rent by myself? Is that how this is working?
You just wouldn't be able to do anything with a poltergeist. You'd just be like, okay, well, you're here.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about most boyfriends anyway, so. You exist, all right.
I do have one that's similar, like in very simple terms, where it's like, would you rather be possessed by a demon or be haunted by a ghost?
Oh. See, the issue with like being possessed by a demon is that you have no control. So as cool as it would be to have the powers of a demon possessing you, I wouldn't want to be like, wake up 30 years later and be like, oh, I destroyed a planet, but I wasn't present for any of it, you know? But then haunted by a ghost, it's so cliche. So no one would believe me. That's tricky. I feel like it'd be more fun to be possessed by a demon, and I know that's probably not the right answer, but I feel like, yeah, maybe possessed by a demon. My friend Sean is obsessed with the fact that at the moment, Lucifer or Satan is in everything at the moment. So like on Netflix, all the TV shows, there seems to be some like Satan thing. And I've got obviously this little ram's head bust that was bought for me about 10 years ago by my brother when I got my first flat. She's obsessed with the fact that it looks very Satan-like. So I know that she's not going to appreciate that answer, but I feel like, yeah, I'd probably go with possessed by a demon. If we could like just hang out in my mind together and then like share responsibility for both my body and the powers, that'd be great. But I don't know if that's how demons work.
We went for a very different approach. Because it's funny, because I would have come to the same conclusion and said possessed by a demon, but mainly because, again, depending how this whole demonic possession thing works, for at least, I assume, the moment of time that you are possessed, because they take you over so completely, I wouldn't be scared. Whereas if I was haunted by a ghost, that's just constant fear.
Yeah, that's fair.
Just like,
yeah, that's. I mean, unless you get like a cute little Casper, that'd be fun. That'd be cute, but you can't guarantee. It's more likely to be the creepy kind.
Variables.
Yeah, so, no, I like that. Yeah, I'm not scared because I'm not present in the moment.
I've been scared for a while.
I like that. I'd rather have like a demonic patron that, like, I saw a TikTok the other day that was like someone pretending to be a demon, like, who has summoned me? And it's just like a little warlock like waving the arms to you again. Like, that would be me. No, Hannah, I cannot help you with your homework again.
Just like, but I summoned you. I'm just like, no.
So Priscilla has said that she's a control freak. She'd rather have the haunting than the possession. Like, that's fair. That's absolutely fair.
If you're haunted, though, there's a limited amount of control you can have because you can't actually do anything about it. unless you bring in some kind of really good like Ghostbuster.
Yeah, and because like thing is, in America, they believe in ghosts so completely that if you have a haunted house, it actually lowers the value of your building. So if you own like a block of flats, for example, and 3 of your tenants say that they've seen a spirit, you can't sell the block of flats for what you bought it for, which is absolutely incredible. That's so bizarre to me.
Or it does the opposite thing where it's like, if there's enough like stories surrounding a building, it will actually become like you can't touch this building, it's abandoned, shut down, we've got to keep people out type thing. So I was watching a YouTube video last night about like haunted places in America, and one of them was an old school, and like it was fine and it just shut down because like they couldn't make anything out of it. But then they've actually put, I think it's 6-foot barbed wire fence all the way around it now, and like they've marked it as like no one can touch this because it's got that many stories surrounding it, and they're just like, stop.
It's a heritage site now, is basically what they've said. That's crazy. Yeah. That's cool though.
Yeah. It's wild.
Fascinating. The way the mind works, eh? That's just, yeah. So my last one is, okay, like I said, they're all related to you discovering something fascinating about your husband. So in this one, your husband is a warlock. So which magical object would you rather he was obsessed with? The old tree in the garden that hasn't sprouted leaves in years, or the bowl with suspicious red stains?
Oh, the tree. You knew I was going to go for the tree.
I was like, maybe if I make it a spooky tree, she won't choose the tree, but no, it's going to be tree every time.
Except for like the story here, I really like it's. I think this is actually story time. I feel like this is a thing from when I was younger, that I like stories being associated with trees, because we went on a trip to a place called Thornbridge when we were in like the final year of primary school, so I would have been like 10, 11. And it was like the whole class goes away for a week and we do this whole adventure thing. It's all very outdoorsy and stuff like that. So
love that.
There was one day where we were going out for a walk to Bakewell, I think it was, but it was quite a long walk. So when we were on the outskirts, we actually sat, there was this big tree, big old tree, and it's one of those where it overhangs, so you quite have to like walk through the branches to get to the trunk. And like a really low stone wall all the way around it. So we were all sat on the stone wall, and the teacher started telling a story about how this was a witch tree. And the story basically was that there was a witch, and because it was old times and people don't like witches, the town tried to drive her out, and were basically trying to harm her. So she turned herself into a tree, and they tried to cut it down so that she wouldn't be able to turn herself back, because she would quite literally be dead in the form of a tree. But she, because of her magic, managed to make the tree so solid that they couldn't cut through it with an axe. And now, like, the story was that if you, like, she was trapped that way because of the, like, trauma of going through that. But if you touch the tree or harm it in any way, then you would get cursed. And I remember, God bless him, this kid tripped over one of the tree trunks. Like, he fully went flying over this roof. And the teacher, when we went back, he had written "die" in ketchup across his pillow. And we were, like, I was in one of the tower rooms at the complete opposite side of the building from where the boys were sleeping. And even though I was up in a tower, complete opposite end of the building, I heard that guy scream. So we all went running in being like, what's going on? And yeah, he showed the pillow that just said "die" straight across it in ketchup.
That teacher is a genius, an evil, evil genius.
He was everybody's favorite teacher because he would actually like do stuff like that and kind of play with us, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, ever since then, I just really liked the actual story that he came up with for that tree, and I was just like, wow, oh my god. So when you said like, oh, there's a dead tree, and I was just like, which?
That one. No, that's fair. Have you ever been to Stourhead, just outside Bath?
No.
So it's where they filmed a lot of Pride and Prejudice and all like the garden scenes and the bit where she's running in the rain. But I went when I was at uni a couple of years ago, and it's so beautiful because they have so many different shape tree and all different colours and stuff like that. And it's just absolutely magical. And I feel like for a tree lover like yourself, like it's the place to be. It's so stunning. But yeah, I think you're right. Like as you were saying, like there are lots of tree stories. Excuse me. It does seem to be a motif that I seem to see quite a lot, and I just find there's something very comforting about seeing a place that has a lot of trees in it. Like almost not necessarily that's been untouched, but just the fact that it just there's something comforting about that. I don't know.
There's
sounds magic.
The stories that are often associated with them are more often witch type stories as well, which is interesting because I suppose they're said to have like more of a connection with nature and stuff, and I'm like, it's interesting that it's just fallen that way as well, even when it's told not by the witches themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I read, so Gavin chose a middle grade read for me, which has a story where a little boy gets turned into a tree. That story is brutal, but he's turned into a tree by a witch who's basically teaching him a lesson for coming onto her property. And it's so dark. And I was like, this is for children. This is terrifying.
I mean, to be fair, my teacher told us a story about someone being cursed by a tree and made it real. So
yeah. Was that a secondary or was that a primary?
Primary.
Yeah. I don't know what it is about scaring little kids, but it's just really people like love it.
Well, it is funny because obviously you could tell it was ketchup, but I think because what he did, he quite literally just went running into the room and was about to jump on the bed and just saw die.
Well, yeah, it would just be abruptly. Yeah, I guess like if you don't have the context of like if you're in with like a group of people and you see it and there's lights on and you see like ketchup, that's one thing. But if you're like, especially when you're just about to fall asleep because that's such a vulnerable time of day when you're just like, I'm just about to. Oh my god! Yeah, no, that would scare me. That would properly scare me.
I feel like you just. I mean, this is me now. Probably would if I was that age, but I feel like if I came across it now, I'd just be like, the fuck.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was I went on a French trip and there was a girl that was in like our group because we were kind of grouped into like rooms of 6 and we hadn't done anything necessarily spooky during the day, but she was obsessed with telling us ghost stories at night, and she really scared the other girls in my room because she'd be like, there's someone sitting next to you, and it used to scare the crap out of people. And I just remember being like, you're just a very strange human being. Like I'm gonna roll over now. I'm done with this. This is weird.
To be fair, when I was younger, I literally had an app on my phone. I can't remember how old I would have been if I had a phone. But I had an app on my phone and I used to just lay in bed in the dark reading ghost stories. And these were like horrible stories. So I don't know how I didn't have nightmares, but I love spooky stories. Although I've got a thing for windows, I do not. If you tell me somebody's in the window, I'm not looking at it. Like it's just
like no.
Even that has a story behind it because I'm just like I'm fairly sure I've seen a ghost via a window.
Go on.
So again, when I was younger, I must have been like 8 or 9 maybe. I really like singing, and when I was younger, I used to. Do you know when it goes dark outside and you can see your reflection in the window? Because I didn't have any mirrors or anything, I used to stand in front of the window and like look at myself singing basically as if I was performing. So I was doing that and I looked up and it literally looked like a man just walked behind me. So obviously I was just like, what on earth? And I can still remember it so clearly to this day. I couldn't see his face too well, but he was wearing like almost like a really thick vintage jumper, and he had a collar. And like this part of it was stripy, and he was wearing jeans, but I couldn't make out what his face was, and it did just look as if he'd walked behind me, whereas that couldn't happen because there was like a wall right next to me.
So
like there's no
where would he have gone? Yeah.
And I remember I just froze to the point where I was just like, do you know when people say that you do quite literally just freeze? And I think that happened. And then presumably a few seconds later, I could move again, and I like fell onto my bed, which was next to me, and just screamed. And my mum and dad came running upstairs being like, what's wrong? And I tried telling them, and they were just like,
they're like, all right.
My mum believed me because we had, like, she also believed in ghosts, and we had a few instances of like things going missing in the house, and I would always be blamed because obviously if it's not the adults, then it's going to be the one child that's in the house. Until the stuff came back in places that I couldn't reach because I was too small. So my mum believed in ghosts, but yeah, it was a really weird thing, and like to this day I can still picture it so clearly. So I was just like, I do not like looking in windows now when it's dark.
No, that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, like I was the same as a kid, like, but not for singing, for dancing. So I did ballet pretty much until the age of 13. So if I didn't have like a long mirror, I would use that kind of glass thing. But obviously, where I've got glasses, they pick up the light. I'm assuming it's this because I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but I can understand that. I also know that I don't know everything, so I don't necessarily want to be like proven wrong because I feel like I would poo my pants. But my assumption at the moment is that they're not real. But the way I rationalize it, so I will have these moments where I will see something walk past me, and it's not necessarily. I usually assume it's a cat because I have two of them, and they run around the house like, you know, bats out of hell. So I usually assume it's a cat, but then I'll turn and it'll be like a wall, and I'll be like, "There's no way." And then sometimes I'm like, "Oh, maybe my glasses have caught the light." And like from a car going, because again we're on a main road, so I have all these little things that kind of like I use to rationalize. Ghosts probably don't exist, but if a ghost was going to exist, it would probably exist in this house because this house was a Victorian missionary. So we've got like a little chapel that's now our kitchen because this is where the nuns used to live. So if you were too poor to go to church, you would come here instead. So you didn't have to pay to come here. You could still be like blessed and prayed and stuff, but you didn't have to pay to get in. So if there's going to be something spooky, it's going to be in this building. But I used to work at a pub where there was like an old story that there was a ghost that lived there, and I never believed it because I was like a cocky 17-year-old that was just like, no, that's fine, like it doesn't exist. But there'd be things that would like just fall off the cabinets just randomly, and I'd be like, okay, well that's just, it's obviously not a great cabinet or whatever. And I would just always try and like rationalize it. But it's a lot more difficult to rationalize something when you're in the room by yourself and you got like, no, don't like that, don't like that.
This is the thing, because while I do like wholeheartedly believe in ghosts, I'm very oh my god, what's the word? Begins with the C. What's the word?
I don't know what I thought you were going to say superstitious, but that's an S.
No, it's like the opposite of that.
Cynical?
Almost, but not quite.
Skeptical?
It's basically, I will still question everything. Like, I'm not easily convinced. So if somebody was just like, "Oh my god, I've seen a ghost," I'd be like, "Did you though?" Even
where's the evidence? Yeah.
Even though I tell my own ghost stories, I'm just like, I am aware that I sound not sane in the head. But yeah, it's really strange. And as well, because I'm even like rationalizing my own experiences, I guess, because the thing with stuff going missing from when I was younger has happened again now. And I'm just like, I haven't had any kind of ghostly experiences in years and years. So I don't know. There was just this one period when I was younger, like loads of random stuff was happening. So much so that I did a deep dive into the land that my house is built on, because the house itself, we are the only people who have ever lived here. So I'm like, no one's died here.
Yeah.
So I was looking at the land, but couldn't really find anything because it's built on, like, the entire area just used to be woodland. People would hunt in and stuff. So I was just like, it's not really any cases of people dying in here. I'm aware. And just couldn't really find anything. So I was just like, I was really confused about where like a ghost would have come. It would have been like miles and miles of woodland. So I was just like, I really don't know. But yeah, we used to have like, it was very specifically plates and stuff going missing, and like glasses, and just basically what the stuff we'd use to eat. We'd have like one going missing and then another one going missing. And I remember a glass went missing because my parents were just like, it's fine if you smashed it to tell us that we can make sure like, there's no glass around. And I'm like, I haven't done anything with this glass. And then it just stopped and things like appeared again. like on top of cupboards that I couldn't reach and stuff. But now one of my plates has gone missing, and I'm just like, this has sent me right back to because it's not even like there's nowhere it could be. Absolutely nowhere. Like my dad's even come over because I was just like, am I just being dumb? Because it's not a plate that like would easily be hidden.
Yeah, plates are usually like,
It's rectangular as well, so it's like it's really quite a big plate, and I'm just like, how is it just vanished? Like it's just gone. And
that's so bizarre.
In my head, I'm just like, well, my dad moved out, so maybe it just got caught up in everything moving. And like he's even checked through all of the boxes and stuff that he took with him in case it got packed accidentally, but it's just not come back. So I'm like, literally, where has it gone?
That's so bizarre.
If I find it on top of the cupboard, I'm gonna
no!
At some point down the line, I'm gonna find it somewhere really random and just be like,
yeah, that's so bizarre. That's kind of cool though, but yeah, no, I don't. It's cool because I'm not living that experience, so I can be like, interesting. I can sleep at night. It's fine.
Becca's house that she lives in, it's really old Victorian thing. I think it's Victorian, might be earlier. And the last time I was there, we were both sat in like her library reading room thing, and there was a huge crash. Like she was sat on the floor, I was sat on the sofa, and it was so loud that like the sofa shook and I could feel it. So we just looked at each other like, what on earth was that? Went running up to find her boyfriend to see if he was okay.
Like, yeah.
He just like fallen on face. He was sound asleep, didn't even like, he was just like, why have you both just come running in here? Yeah. So we're looking around trying to find where this crash had come from, and it couldn't have been like, you can only really hear one side of the neighbours, and it wouldn't have been them based on where it was, because it would have been like a alleyway between, so it wouldn't have been like, we wouldn't have been able to feel it if something had happened. And we were just trying to find everything. It was a very particular crash, like it sounded metallic, as if I described it as if a ladder had fallen. And there was actually a ladder in the alleyway, so we went out to see if it was still like on the wall, and it hadn't moved or anything. So we were just like, what on earth could that have possibly been? And I was just like, your house is haunted. She's got this really creepy cellar, and I was just like, this is definitely haunted. The second
I love that. That's hilarious.
I was meant to go there next weekend for Halloween, but obviously I can't now because renewed lockdown and stuff. And I was just like, I am going to vlog in your cellar, right? I'm going to spend Halloween night in your cellar to see if it's haunted.
I love that. That's so funny. But like, you telling that story made me really think. When I was about, I must have been 14 because I just had my appendix out. So my 14th year was very strange because I obviously was going into like year 10, I think it was. So I'd missed loads of school. I'd been really, really ill. And my parents thought I had an eating disorder because every time I ate something, I would then bring it back up. And I was like, I'm not doing it on purpose. And I went from being a size 16 rugby player to a size 6. It was, and this was over 6 to 7 weeks. Like I dropped. And it turns out I had appendicitis, and I'd played rugby with it, and it had ruptured. So it was a crazy, my heart stopped beating for 14 seconds whilst I was on the operating table, which my mum only told me like 5 years ago. And I was like, that's a great part of the story. You should have told me this. That's exciting. I'm basically a zombie. That's really exciting. But in the same year, so I'd come back, I was just starting to go back to work because I used to work for my mum who had a wedding dress shop, which I loved, obviously, because I love spending time with happy people, talking about being together. And I haven't been single for 100 years. That's not a problem. So really loved that job. And I was getting ready, and I had this massive triple door cherry wood antique wardrobe that my mum had given me, which didn't go with anything else in my room. But she loved this wardrobe, and so I had to love it in her place because it only fit in my room. And all of a sudden there was this like crash, and it sounded like the wardrobe had toppled over, but I knew it hadn't because it was still in front of me. And I was like, what on earth is that? And then the crash continued. So it was kind of like it had an echo. And it went from like the sound of a wardrobe falling over to the sensation of a train going through your building. And it turned out it was an earthquake. And I looked out of my window and bricks were throwing themselves off of my wall.
Wow.
And it was absolutely terrifying. But it only lasted like for a few seconds, but it felt like it lasted forever. My mum came running into my room to see if I was okay. And the first thing I said to her was, it wasn't my fault, I didn't do it. I assumed that I had knocked something over and was just like, let's cover all bases. It wasn't my fault. She was like, well, that's a, you know, my dad was in the shower, so I was really worried about him, like, when I found out afterwards, because he like smacked against the wall and like slid down. My brother slept through the whole thing. It literally, like, our house was considered derelict. It got like loads of tape around it. We had to have scaffolding put up the next day. We weren't allowed to sleep in it. But my mom was such a snob that she was like, I would rather we just sleep all together in the living room than I take you to the Samaritans. Who's calling you? Anyone exciting?
Someone just rang me. That was rude. I don't know what you guys just saw, but because I have iPhone and I like an Apple laptop, it just took over everything. I'm like, no.
It was just your face going, oh.
I muted myself because my laptop started ringing, so I was like, that's going to be really loud.
I love that. But yeah, Kieran slept through an earthquake that basically destroyed our house. So that was an interesting week.
Wow. Oh god.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we should read. I've called it a live reading. We should probably read at some point.
Like we should get to an hour now, to be fair. Like, still have a couple of would you rathers.
Yeah, go on.
So these ones are a bit more specific. Would you rather follow a dark tunnel in an ancient castle only to find it leads to the catacombs, or would you rather lose your way in an ancient and supposedly haunted woodland?
Oh, I do like a castle. But I also really like getting lost in the woods. Like, it's something that my parents and I used to do when we were kids, because there's three of us. So it's me and my two younger brothers. So if you're trying to wear out three small children, all under the age of 5, you take them to woods and you park where you know the car is, and you let them get lost in this woodland that's obviously got a path, and you're never really going to get lost. But I loved that. I used to love just running straight into the woods and then trying to find my way back to my parents, who were obviously taking their good sweet time and following like the little path and stuff. And obviously I was probably never out of their sight, but it felt like a little adventure. And we used to go on like 5-mile walks, which as an adult I'm like, that's not very far at all, but for a kid it felt like a proper adventure. So I feel like, as much as I love a castle, and I like visiting a castle. We've got the Dover Castle with all the World War II like barracks and things, all the like the stuff that they've built in there. But no, trees. I'm gonna go with trees again.
See, I would do the opposite for the same reason. I'm just like, I feel like I love it too much that because I'm picturing this at night, I don't want to ruin my love for woodland.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
terrifying.
Fair.
And because even when I go for my walks in the woodland nearby, because obviously it's awesome and all the leaves are falling and stuff, the amount of like cracking and like it literally sounds like there's somebody stepping on a twig behind me. And every single time it makes me jump. But even though I'm just like, I'm nice and calm and peaceful, I'm just like, shit, someone behind me.
See, we used to camp quite a lot as teenagers, and there are lots of places to camp around here, but obviously it's all woodland that's owned by farmers and stuff. And my friend Ian Fry, who is one of my favorite people on the planet because he's just so strange, he always told me that it's fine. A farmer is only allowed to shoot you if you surprise them. So if you make lots of noise, you're not a surprise. So we used to go walking at night in woods all the time just to try and find somewhere to camp, and then we'd like throw up the pop-up tent and then drag it home at 3 o'clock in the morning because we were cold, you know, like. So that's there's nothing really scary about woodland noises. And I guess because with all the like, yeah, I get that obviously the cracking around you, but I'm not a quiet person. You have to be quite quiet to hear like the animal sounds and stuff. They hear you coming. So I guess yeah, I think that's why like Blair Witch Projects and stuff like that never really scared me, because I was just kind of I was like, They're just going camping. Like, nothing bad's gonna happen. It's just whoever disappeared first got cold and went home.
Fair. I'm a really quiet person in terms of like, even when I'm walking, like I always used to make my dad jump just coming downstairs, because even though the stairs crack, I'm so light-footed that they wouldn't. So I'd just like appear in the room and he's like, crack.
God. Yeah.
Like, I'm not even trying to be quiet. I'm just really light-footed. So I think if I heard like my surroundings make noise, I'd be like, well, that wasn't me.
Yeah, that's spooky. Yeah, no, I think because we're very different in that people know when I walk into a room, they're like, oh, she's here. People can hear me coming. Like, they're like, oh godish. Yeah, it got like when I was a teacher, my students, I'd walk into a classroom. If I got there after them, they would be sat quietly, and I'd be like, it's because they could hear me. They knew I was on my way. Like, I was never going to be that teacher that was like surprised. Like, they knew I was there. No, that's yeah.
And at the same time, like I did think, oh, maybe, because again, if I'm picturing this at night, like I almost just ruined my own theory, because I was like, I feel like it'd be a bit warmer in a catacomb, and I was like, probably not.
Castles are so cold, so cold. So we've got I was saying this to a couple of other people. The reason I did Gothtober in the first place is because this time last year I rented a castle and basically organised a writing workshop, and was like, for £45 you can have a 3-course meal. I will talk at you about Gothic fiction for 2 hours, and then you've got 3 hours to just enjoy this castle. Because my mum knows the owner, so it was really easy to just kind of be like, you like me, you'll let me book this way. As opposed to like, and because of course they'd had loads of weddings cancelled for all sorts of reasons, so they were like, yeah, if you do it on a weekday, we can do it for like 250 quid. I was like, sold. So obviously I couldn't do that this year, but we spent the night in the castle. They had to light all the fires because obviously Halloween, so cold. And we used to do wedding fairs there, which is how obviously my mum got to know them. And you'd be there on a Sunday morning with your coat on, being like, here's this very nice dress that we can show you. I wouldn't recommend you try it on though, because you'll freeze to death.
Yeah. Oh god.
So, yeah, no, they are chilly. All right, I've got one last one. I don't know how many you've got left, but I only made the 3. So oh no, that was the tree and the leaf. No, so I've done all of mine. Have you got any more? Or have you got?
I have one more.
Go
on. Would you rather live an immortal life but within the confines of Dracula's castle, or would you rather live a normal life, die when your time comes, but come back to haunt the last place you were?
That's interesting, because again, it goes back to the one you were talking about earlier about how you're going to die. Because if I was hit by a car, cool, so I get to just hang out on this zebra crossing forever. That's not exciting. I'm like, all right, we're going to count the yellow cars. I'm going to randomly punch a stranger in the arm. That's not fun. But then also, if lockdown has taught me anything, it's that I don't mind my own company and being in my home all the time, so long as I get to decide that. The moment someone tells me I can't leave, then we have problems. So I feel like, I mean, it makes more sense now why Dracula invited Jonathan Harker to visit, because he's like, I just need just some social interaction would be nice. Yeah, I don't know. I think, and also if you died of old age, you're like, cool, so I'm just hanging out in a hospital forever. Like, they're not fun places to be all the time.
You're doing the exact same thing as what I thought when I started, because I was like, there's too many variables in just the last place you were. Like, you don't know what that's going to be. And like, I also wouldn't want to be, it's that thing where I'm like, as a ghost in a really good story, I wouldn't want to be an old lady ghost, but obviously I don't want to die early. So.
yeah, middle-aged ghost would be all right, like in my 40s to 50s.
But I would be one of those ghosts where like everybody, I feel like I'd be the ultimate troll of a ghost, because I would definitely make sure people know I exist by terrifying them all the time. But I'd want it to be that well known that like ghost hunters come constantly, just so that I could annoy them by never showing myself on camera. So it's just like, I would show them that I exist when they turn the cameras off. Yeah. And then like, for God's sake.
I like that. Or just like you missed up a random window and like write something into it, but then you blow on it just so they turn the camera on, so the message disappears.
You're just like rubbing it out.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. Yeah, well, like I saw a video the other day that was talking like this girl had done a 3-minute video on outfits she would wear if she thought she was going to die that day. So it was the idea that she was like, if I die, this is what I will be haunting you in. And it was all like ball gowns that she'd obviously like just collected some like really nice dresses, and she was like, So like, yeah, if I could guarantee that I was going to die well dressed, then I don't really mind where I haunt. But I feel like having actually visited the castle that Bram Stoker based Dracula on, I could live there. That's a nice castle. That's a good castle. So like they've got it's basically like on this tall rock plinth sort of thing. So you have to walk up quite a lot of stairs, and then it's just a really nice house at the top of this castle. But it was then like bought by some royal family, so the furnishings are very nice and very antique and very, very beautiful. So I'm like, no, I could live there. I could live there. So long as I didn't have to be one of his creepy wives or killing babies, I feel like I'd be all right.
This is the thing, I was just like, I think I'd go for the vampire one because I'm fine just staying at home. He's got, depending if I could, I said the confines of the castle, didn't I? So I won't be able to go outside to the woods, but a nice view.
The castle grounds, there is a nice little park there. I'm literally talking about Bran's castle right now, but like, because he's not confined to his castle, because he picks obviously Jonathan Harper up in the carriage and has to kill the little sprites that are trying to like let Harker know to get out of there. So I guess you've got some wiggle room there.
And as well, because people always, like nowadays, go to the castle to try and like see the vampire castle, then I'm just like, you get visitors, you get to social.
Yeah, you get to see. The Wi-Fi signal's great there, so...
I'm set, like, I would be fine.
Fine. Yeah, I guess that's right. And also, if you're talking about, even if it wasn't that castle, but like the fictional version, if your curse is to the confines of the castle, and then you build an extension,
just keep
still technically, just moving closer and closer to the coast. And you're like, well, I'm still under this canopy of building, but I'm on the beach, so it's fine.
You basically just build a bridge.
Yeah, you're just like, lawyered, I've done it.
Just keep building extensions, it's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe just build a whole network of like underground tunnels.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. Yeah, and you're like, yeah, still part of the castle, it still counts.
I'm just like,
I love that.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Haven't seen sunlight for years. Still in the castle. I love that. That's clever. Oh, that's really interesting. Is there like a particular gothic fictional building that you're like, ooh, I wish that was real because I'd live there?
Oh, I don't know, because a lot of the ones that I've read are just either burnt down manor houses or the vague sort. So it's just like there is a castle somewhere. You can't get here. Like it's just over there somewhere. So
behind those trees somewhere.
Yeah, there's nowhere that I can be like, I want to visit there. And because all of them are described pretty much the same, so it's just like old stones, you've got some tunnels lit by candles. Just like, cool.
Yeah, that's fair. They're very classic Anglo-Saxon castles, aren't they? Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, no, I guess to be fair, the last few really gothic books that I've read have all been set at schools, and I'm like, no, I don't want to live in a school. That's not for me.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like the only thing that makes like abandoned schools scary to me is the fact that like child ghosts are infinitely going to be scarier. Just because I'm like, they don't know what they're doing, basically. Like you can't guarantee that they're just going to be all sweet.
Well, also, yeah, they haven't fully. The thing I find scary about children in general, ghosts or otherwise, is that they don't have a fully formed moral compass yet, because they haven't learnt it all yet. They haven't learned, well, I didn't like that, so I shouldn't do that to other people because they won't like it either. They haven't registered that. So it's why I find toddlers so disconcerting, because like if they like you, great, but if they decide for some arbitrary reason that you are a demon and they just scream at you, that is terrifying to me.
And
so
also, children just naturally have this thing, I don't know where it comes from because we're supposed to teach children not to, but all seem to naturally have this thing where, because they like games and things that make them laugh, for some reason that's violence all the time. Like, they'll just smack someone, and because they react, they're like, ha ha, and then just keep doing it, and I'm like, stop it.
It's so true.
Always just hit things, and I'm like, stop it.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how to make a joke, so my ha-has come from you being in pain.
It's just because I think it's just the reaction side of things that makes them laugh, but I'm just like, no, they need to learn that that actually hurts, and that's not good.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine, she's got a little boy, and I don't know how old he is, he can't be more than 2, but he started like grabbing her chin, but like really hard. And like,
hair.
Yeah. Dangly earrings are a big no, because they will yank. No. No. I mean, I always feel like I sound like I don't know if there's like a word for really anti-maternal, but I don't really have a maternal bone in my body, because when I was 17, I was basically told that I can't have kids because I've got polycystic ovarian syndrome. So it would be possible with like IVF and loads of other treatment and stuff, but there's just loads of complications that for some reason that's just not going to work for me. So as a 28-year-old, I'm like, well, I'm never going to have children. Children disgust me. It's fine. So I always feel like I'm really like, I come down really hard on kids and stuff anyway. But they just give me the creeps. That's why, like, I did 2 weeks at a primary school as part of my teacher training, and I only did 3 days of the second week, and I didn't do the third week that I was supposed to do at all, because kids are creepy.
It's just the idea of child ghosts, because it is the whole I want to play a game thing. Like, they always just want to play, and I'm like, that's like fair enough when you're alive, but please don't.
Yeah, as a ghost, no.
Rolling balls around and all that fun stuff, then I'm just going to be out of this building like a shot.
No, thank you. No, too scary. Don't like that. Don't like that at all.
And it's like the weird disembodied laughter.
Oh yeah, no. Like, there's do you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
No.
Oh, okay. There's an episode in it where there are these 2 little girls singing. It's very much a homage to The Shining or whatever. And they sing this really creepy little song about the monsters that are going to come and attack, and it's just kind of like a prelude to it. But it's very, very kind of like Ring Around a Rosie's kind of tune, and it's so creepy. And it like, it doesn't matter how many times I've seen that episode. That for me is the scariest bit. Is when these girls come out and starts. Nope, don't like that. Don't like that at all.
It's just anything that is usual for children. As soon as they're dead, it's just like, nope, that's creepy. It's like, even children when they're alive, they just stare at you, and I'm like, stop it.
Like, yeah, if you're like on public transport and they really just, and it's the slow turn, because obviously they're just taking everything in, but when they're just like, no, don't like that, don't like that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Who'd have thought this would be a live about racism and creepy kids?
And no reading whatsoever.
None whatsoever. We're at an hour and 6 minutes in. I'm not even remotely surprised. I tried really hard. Like, Keris had to be like, Hannah, should we do some reading now? I was like, yeah. Oh, yeah. So have you seen the Doctor Who episode of Are You My Mummy? That's creepy.
No, but I do love it.
Ugh,
I just
creepy.
See, I'm now well in the mood to just chat about all the...
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't, because on Halloween weekend, I want to do a Halloween vlog where I just do as many Halloween things as possible. So I'm just like, film recommendations, but also I'm well aware that I live by myself. So I'm like, where do I draw the line? I don't know. But I do, like I said, I used to literally just read in bed at night. Just all of the like demonic stories, which I feel like for some reason, as much as I'm terrified of ghosts, demons are scarier because they tend to be more violent, I think. Whereas like with ghosts, you've got a bit of leeway about, like, it depends on the person. And like the circumstance and everything. So whereas demons are just like, you have this portal, you didn't mean to summon me, but you don't have a body now. It's just like, okay, well.
I was always fascinated, so I've started eating, because they've been sat here the whole time, and I'm like, I've been really good, but I really wanted one. Have you ever seen Witches of Eastwick?
I don't think so. I don't ring a bell.
So it was originally a musical, And essentially it's about these 3 women who are witches in Eastwick, and they summon the devil because they want something to just liven up their lives a little bit. And they're 3 single women, so they all have like a sexual relationship with him, and that's fine. Right up until they realise, oh yeah, he's the devil. So he starts doing like really horrible things to like other people in the town and starts like systematically destroying their life. And they kind of have to go, okay, well, it was nice having a boyfriend, but you're right, this is more drama than I needed, and they have to like get rid of him and stuff. But it was turned into a TV series. The TV series is not scary at all, but the musical, the play of it, is just so fantastically creepy. But it is that whole thing that when you were mentioning about demons is you can't guarantee which demon you're going to get, which is a very Faustus-y type thing. And you also can't guarantee that when you're done, they'll also be done, because they are eternal beings. This is just another day for them. They've already, you know, they're not going to have a midlife crisis and stop. They're going to, this is forever now. And I need a little bit more change than that. I need a demon that's not going to be, I'm also a commitment phobe. So, you know, we don't need to be together all the time, you know? I need an easy breezy demon.
If they exist.
If they exist, that's the kind that I'm looking for, you know? Just, yeah, that's fine. You go off and pillage. I'm going to sit here and read my book. I'll see you in 3 days. You know, that kind of demon.
I feel like I'm like really drawn to the ghost side of things because they usually come with stories. And I really like the stories behind it. So I'm just like, tell me everything. Like anytime I see an old building, I'm like, I need to like dig for the ghost stories of this place. I need to find out everything, basically.
Is there a building like near where you are that you're like, it has like some really cool ghost stories that you've discovered?
Trying to think. There is I have a castle really nearby actually. In fact I have 2, but there's one which is basically just ruins at this point. Like it's, you could miss it because it's not that much of a ruin. And I actually went there again when I was in primary school as a school trip. You're not allowed to now because it's too derelict. But we did go there, and again, I was convinced that this place was haunted because I'm like, how could it not be? But all that's left is like part of 2 walls that were apparently a gallery wall, I think it was. And then there's like this, I can't remember what they called it, but it's basically a big pit in the ground. That stuff used to be thrown down. And then there's one singular, like tiny tower. And we actually went in there and we like did a workshop in like writing with quills and ink and stuff. But I remember they said that was haunted, and now I can't go past it without being like, that tower's haunted. Because apparently, I can't remember who it was, but some kind of like one of the royals way back when used to just spend hours in this tower like writing, which is why we went to do it. And yeah, it's one of those places where I'm just like, I really want to deep dive into the history of this particular castle.
That's really cool. That's really, I mean, I was quite lucky. I was going to try and find a photo. So for my master's, it was part of Bath Bar Uni, but it was hosted. The postgrads were all in one building that wasn't actually on campus. It was in Corsham Court, which is the most gothic looking building you've ever seen. And there was a library that was kind of like, you had like the main library that was kind of small, but then you had like some back rooms behind it that would be, from where they are, you can't even necessarily see the big windows when you walk up the drive. And it was just so beautiful. But I was like, there must be some really spooky stories based here. But I'm going to see if I can try and find a photo. It's going to come up really badly because it's on my phone and then on webcam. But I just want to kind of show you. There you go. Let's see if I can open up. I've got to save it first so that I can then actually make it big enough. So this is great content, guys. I hope you're enjoying it.
There is another castle which honestly like breaks my heart a little bit what they've done to it, because it's really not that far. Like if I went walking 2 minutes down the road now, I'd find it. And they've converted it into like private apartments, but you can still see the outline of the castle itself. But like part of it's really modern, and I'm just like, I hate this so much. I hate it. Because
I hate it when they do that and they take something and you're like, you could have just left it alone though, couldn't you?
It's got such a great history as well. So I'm like, if you literally just left that, you would have a heritage site right there, because it's Mary Queen of Scots was held there.
Oh, that's cool.
She was held in multiple castles in Sheffield. When she had all of her drama with Elizabeth. So we have, like, you can literally trace all of the places that Mary Queen of Scots was kept as a prisoner in Sheffield.
That's really crazy.
Yeah, there's
that's
like
cool though.
One that's really interesting. It's like a theory, so it's not proven as far as I'm aware anyway. The park near me, there's this tiny house. Well, it's not tiny actually, it's more of a cottage, but because it looks cottagey, I'm like, just like, oh, a small quaint place. I think the groundskeeper of the park now lives there, but apparently she was held there as well. So there's just like castles all around Sheffield. It's just like Mary Queen of Scots was here.
That's really cool. We have a lot of big houses that's like, oh, this particular king's mistress lived here. It's not nearly as exciting. You're like, oh, like, no, that's so, like, there's my friend's mum bought it. She's like, yeah, this is where Edward III's mistress used to live. And I was like, oh, that's a fun little anecdote to have about the place that you live. All right. This is as close, like, I can't find, it won't let me save it, unfortunately, but this is like the clearest photo I can find, so hopefully you can see.
Oh yeah.
So it's super gothic-y, and it is absolutely stunning. And I remember, like, I dragged like some friends from home. They came up to Bristol to visit me, and I was like, can I show you my uni? And they were like, we'd rather go out drinking, but okay, if you really want to show us your uni, we will pander to you for 5 minutes. And then I took them, and they were like, it's stunning. And like, all immediately, like, I was like, yeah, I didn't bring you here for nothing. Like, it is a beautiful building, and it's got loads of like gardens and stuff. So that's actually the back of the house. That's the other side. It's even more elaborate, and you can see where, like, the carriage, like, road would have been, because you've got trees that are obviously hundreds of years old either side, and then just this long stretch of grass that kind of leads all the way to the road. I'm like, oh, it's so pretty. Pretty.
The park again that I keep referencing that's nearby, because, like I said, this was just loads of woodland for a while, but it was one of the first public parks, and I think it was opened during the Victorian times. So there's like really old photos of like people, because this park is just it's got one big circular path, but it's so wide for a path, and that's because it was actually a road. And it would be the sort where, like, horse-drawn carriages, like, that would be the day out for a Victorian lady, just going round this park in a horse-drawn carriage, or just walking around, like, with one of her friends or something. So there's just really, like, old photos of horse-drawn carriages in this park, and I'm just like, I'm now, like, quite literally walking on the same path that used to be full of horses and carriages. And there is this one, I can't remember what it used to be, but there's an archway basically that used to be the entrance to a bigger building, and it's not there anymore because it burnt down. So you've only got the archway left, and you can see where it burnt, because it's all blackened and stuff. And I'm just like, it's just really random, because so I always, every single time I look at that, I can't help but just think of all the photos with carriages walking where I am right now.
That's really cool. We've got, so where the harbour is essentially during the First World War is where, and I think probably in the Second World War as well, a lot of the troops basically came to Folkestone, because Dover obviously was a commercial port, whereas now it's kind of both. So Folkestone was the kind of overtaken by the military. So there are loads of photos of, like, areas in Folkestone just full of soldiers. And I'm like, that's so bizarre to me to think that people didn't really live here as such. This is just where they came before they went to war, and this is where all, like, we've got the big Victoria Hospital, which was obviously a military hospital, and then certain buildings that were commandeered and things like that is just fascinating. And I like history, but I find that I fall into, like, certain periods of history for certain reasons, as opposed to just generally being a history buff. And war history has probably the least interest for me, just because the fact that we then see, like, the circle again, and the fact that there's still, I find that quite jarring. But just to see all these photos and to be like, I live on that road, and to see all these that's really really powerful. I think it's bizarre that it can have that kind of impact on you. but we've got this massive theatre in town called the Lees, and there you can find online the blueprints that Adolf Hitler had made of it, because he was going, when he landed, he was going to take over Folkestone because he knew this was such an important place military wise, and he was going to turn that into his British headquarters. So he was going to take over this particular theatre, and you can see all the blueprints and stuff. And there is a clock tower, but it was part of a church, but now it's just a clock tower because they were going, again, because they knew it was a really important place military wise. They knew that this was the church that all the soldiers went to before they went abroad. They would go there and pray and have like their final service on British soil. And the Germans decided to bomb it, but they didn't appreciate daylight savings time, so all the soldiers were actually still in bed when they bombed the church, and no one was hurt. So I just think that makes me happy.
When it comes to war stuff, I find it like one of the, because Sheffield is one of the biggest cities, and we're known for making steel. So because it's so big of a place, it was both a place that would be aimed for regarding bombings, because we would be making a lot of the weapons in the factories, but also children would be evacuated to the countryside here, because Sheffield is quite literally like, it's one of the biggest cities, but it's actually quite closely confined in terms of like the city part, and then the rest of it is just land. So it's really interesting to me seeing that like it would both be bombed, but also you would send children for the complete opposite reason, because it's like if you just send them far out enough, they are actually in the countryside.
Yeah, absolutely safe. Yeah.
So
there was
regarding history, there's quite a lot of like if you drive anywhere leaving Sheffield, if you see any big house, you can guarantee that children would have been evacuated there, because that's pretty much what they were all used for.
That's cool, because I'm currently working on a book for a woman who was evacuated during the Second World War, and she lived in Newcastle and then was taken to Cumbria. And she said that essentially, I was just having a look on the map as to where Sheffield is, because she said essentially, because planes couldn't carry the bombs very far, obviously a lot of one side, and I was thinking, where Sheffield is like almost slap bang in the middle, it would have been like a prime target. I'm terrible with geography, so I did have to Google it first, but I just find stuff like that fascinating. When I was in Bath, I couldn't afford rent in a proper house for a while, so I lived in a shed in some woman's garden. Now, she had told me it was a chalet. I can confirm it was a shed. It was a shed key that she gave me. There was no central heating. It was a electric radiator. I got so cold that I got insomnia. It was really, really bad. But it was so close to where they used to practice the like it was near like a barracks, but they used to practice heavy artillery fire because there were just so many fields that essentially they would put soldiers out into the middle of nowhere and then just bomb them. So once a week I would be woken up at about 10 o'clock at night by what sounded like a giant walking over my building. And no, they're just practicing heavy artillery fire up the road. So that was intense. But it was quite funny. It makes for a funny story. I'm like, yeah. That was something that happened to me. But yeah, I find all stuff like that fascinating. And like some of the stories she's got, so she got taken to this tiny little village, and the fact that the way kids were dropped off, because they were all collected up on a train, taken off into different directions, and then taken on like essentially like a bus. And then once they reached the villages, they were given like sandwiches and lunch and stuff like that, and really settled in. And then the adults would pick and choose which children they would take home. So it wasn't just a case of, okay, you've been assigned to this family. It would be a case of, well, I have a farm, so I want to take these 3 boys. They can work on my farm, and essentially like free labor. So the youngest girls were always the ones that were left. And I was like, but they're the ones that are going to be the most scared. Like that would absolutely terrify me, I think. But it's just how it had to be done.
Well, that was another thing as well, like when it comes to Sheffield as a location, because like if I was to walk into town right now, the first thing I would come across is the train station. So where I live isn't too far from where like all of the like really old photos are, because it's always just like train station, this is important, we have one of the biggest train stations in all of the cities, and like that was seen as one of his attributes, but also again was another aim, I guess, because that's the way that everything was being transported, whether it be people or supplies and stuff. So it's really bizarre because if I like go into, for instance, I've got a museum nearby, and it's basically just based on the city itself. So there's one room which has loads of like really old photos and stuff, and I'm just like, I can guarantee I will find a photo of some place not too far from my house in here because I live really close to the train station. So I'm going to be able to see, like, in the background of, like, I live on that hill.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. But yeah, I think it is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but no, I prefer the kind of this house was built by the Edwardians and it has all these kind of features in that I
like the old history. There is so they're actually excavating. I can never quite say that. They're digging up because there was, as much as I keep saying like, oh, there's these smaller castles, there was a big castle in Sheffield at one point, and they've not, like, they knew it was there because they'd find bits and bobs, and like obviously you can't just not have evidence of this massive castle, but there's not ruins or anything to go and visit, or at least they thought that. Because there was actually this market and it shut down, I think, maybe 2 years ago. So when they got rid of that, they realized, like, somebody just started seeing if they could find any evidence of the castle that was supposedly in the same place. And they dug further than they ever had before. And they actually came across, like, pretty much not a completely intact thing, but you could, if you dug far down enough and dug it out, you would be able to walk around the lower levels of this castle. And I'm just like, I really hope that they do that and open it as like a place to visit, because I just would love to see it. And they've managed to blueprint the lower half of the castle and just come out with so much more evidence than they ever have done. And I'm just like, I really want to see this.
That's really cool.
So I'm like, what? I want to, because I don't know who lived there or anything. I need to do some more research, but yeah. Castle has been there this entire time.
That's really cool, because they the one I thought you were going to say, they had it on like the One show or whatever they talked about last year when we had like the hottest summer ever. They discovered the outline of a castle that they thought had been lost, because obviously the brickwork had held the heat, so the grass above it had died, whereas the other grass hadn't. And that to me is just incredible, that we can then discover something that we thought had been completely lost, that the foundations are still there. It's just phenomenal. I just think that's really cool.
Quite a lot, because it would either be they retain the heat or they would retain the water. So it's like that bit of grass would be more watered than the rest of it, so you'd see the outlines of everything.
Yeah.
And that's why, because I can't remember what it was I watched, but it was some kind of documentary about this very thing, because they were just like, we've now started using drones more often than we ever thought we would, because it could just be a case that one day this feels more dry than it should have been, and we've found a whole new building. Which is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's really cool, because you just think, it's like you said earlier about the idea of like humanity and science kind of meeting in the middle. I feel like that's a nicer end of that spectrum, is the idea that, yeah, if you think you spend a lot, as an archaeologist, you spend a lot of time looking at old things, but obviously you spend a lot of time with new technology, and with new technology comes more discovery. Because my aunt's professor of, I don't know if she's a professor, she's got a master's in archaeology, and she spends a lot of time x-raying things, to see what's inside them, basically. And the idea that you can find these like old pots, but then they've got other things inside them, just fascinates me, absolutely fascinates me. But yeah,
in the museum that's nearby, there's a whole ancient Egyptian part, and they quite literally have a mummy, which I have many I don't like mummies being on display.
You wouldn't do it for any other, like,
it's a dead body. I'm just like, you wouldn't go and get a coffin out of the cemetery and put it on display, would you? It's just disrespectful. But it is there, and they do have an X-ray of it, because obviously it's like within the tomb, so they have that on display, and then they've got an X-ray of the body, and I'm just like, that is really unnerving to think that, like, that there's just a dead body right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the X-ray is bizarre.
Yeah. Oh, we did. So the Saatchi Gallery have the Tutankhamun or they had before lockdown, the Tutankhamun exhibition. And my mum bought us tickets to go because she's fascinated with things like that. And my mum has a real morbid curiosity with death and things like that. She was a funeral celebrant for a while, so she, she's obsessed. It's creepy, but anyway, she took us to the Saatchi Gallery, and obviously it has all the jewels and things and all the objects and stuff. But they didn't have Tutankhamun's body because it's still resting in Egypt. And I was like, I don't know if that's weirder that they've taken everything else out to show off, but or the fact that because they had a sarcophagus that they'd made and then put the jewelry that would have been placed on top of his sarcophagus on top of it, so it wasn't the real thing, but the jewels were all the real thing, and the furniture was all the real thing. It was a really, when you're there and you're looking at this thing, it's fascinating, and you're learning, and you're kind of not necessarily walking in their footsteps, but understanding the similarities and the differences in the way we process deities and how important they were to their culture. The idea that he's not just their leader, he is their tangible connection to God, and or whichever gods they believe in or prefer or whatever it is. And you're just enwrapped in it. And there's this massive statue that always makes me think of the Ozymandias poem that was it was like 50 feet tall. Like it was this crazy tall, but it's obviously a recreation of the sarcophagus that they've then put on top of the pyramid that then has been lugged across the country, like across internationally. And then you walk away and you're just like, that's so bizarre. And yeah, like you said, disrespectful that I can pay £20 to go and look at all this stuff that wasn't meant for me. And it's just, that I have really conflicting feelings, because I love visiting a museum and I love seeing all those things and kind of learning about it, but they shouldn't be there. Like, they shouldn't.
I had this entire thing last time I went to London, because I can't remember which museum it is. Probably just the British Museum, one of the huge ones.
Yeah, the British one is,
and they quite literally have like the walls of the Parthenon in there and the marbles, and like I obviously like loving Greek mythology was just like, oh my god, I'm walking within the walls because they'd like recreated it. And then I picked up the leaflet which was supposed to tell you more, and I was just like almost disappointed, because I was like, as much as I've just loved this leaflet was basically just like, oh yeah, the Greek government are trying to get these back off us, but our argument is that everybody should be able to benefit from these. And I was just like, it's not yours. Like, this shouldn't be here. As much as I'm loving seeing it, this isn't what it should be here for.
Yeah. There's literally a bit, so in Superior, in her introduction, she literally says, like, it starts with this really powerful sentence. So I'm just going to read it without the context of it. Like, it's literally just the first line. I am surrounded by dead people, asking myself what I am. Where I am is the British Museum. And it's just the idea that she goes there to find who she is. And then she talks about how that basically the British Museum is based on a lie. It's based on the idea that we are all in this together, as opposed to because, and she talked about, I'm trying to find the second bit. So yeah, walk past the statues of Greek gods, their bodies considered the ideal human physical perfection, and you're witness to this narrative. Walk past the white marble sculptures removed from the Parthenon in Athens, even as they crumbled, and you begin to see the museum as a testament to the struggle for domination, the possession of the deep roots of civilization itself. And the museum served one story. Great Britain, this small island nation, had the might to take the treasures, 8 million exquisite objects from every corner of the globe. And they did so they could sit on the shoulders of giants. And it's just this whole thing that, yeah, I mean, obviously in this context, it's about the superiority of it. That, yes, because I have this big gun, you're going to follow my society now. But I think it's quite jarring, because there is no reason why we should still be holding on to things, especially with, I know travel obviously isn't available to everyone, and the British Museum is free for most exhibits, so people are going to experience something they may not be able to experience otherwise. But a flight to Rome is £27 with Ryanair. Like, that's less than a train jet. Like, for me to get a day rider to London on the train is £47. So it costs me less to fly to Rome than it does to go to London. So if I wanted to see the Colosseum, it would cost me less than going to the British Museum to see parts of the Colosseum that they've taken or artifacts they've taken from Rome. So it's just I can't remember which comedian it is, but there is a comedian, it's either Dara O'Brien or Russell Howard, where they say that obviously there's all these arguments about like Greece wanting their stuff back. And I know when I say it like that, it sounds really petty, but obviously I'm minimizing it a little bit. But he says, no, you can't have it. Why not? We're still looking at it. It's like, yeah, just, we could make replicas and have museums of, the real thing is here. Here's some photographs. Here's this. And yeah.
This is the thing, because like the room we were in literally just before was full of replicas. Like they had built, like you wouldn't have known they were replicas because they were so big, and they were quite literally just like colossal statues. And we were walking on a walkway that was 3 levels up to reach the top of it and stuff like that. And I was just like, this is incredible that they've managed to replicate it so realistically. And there was all this information on how they'd done it and stuff. And then we walked into the next room, and I again thought they were replicas. And then they were just like, no, this is the real thing, we stole it. And I'm like, excuse me?
This is ours now. We took it.
And the entire like information leaflet, there wasn't too much in there, obviously, because they didn't want to present it as if they'd stolen it. But like even just looking at the text without even reading it, you could see that like there was a tiny, like maybe 2 or 3 sentences saying like, Greece want this back. And then there was 2 pages of the British argument, and I was like, straight away, you've got a problem there.
Yeah, it doesn't sit right with me, but it's that conflicting. So I was talking to a financial advisor the other day, because I'm part of like a business network, so I get to meet really cool businesses all the time, and he does a lot with ethical financial advice. So it used to be a case of, if you wanted to invest your money in something, morning Karis has joined us. If you wanted to invest your money, your financial advisor would have to ask you, do you have any strong moral or political values regarding how you spend your money? And it's such a broad topic that most people would just say, well, no, not really. Like, I'm just a normal human being. I don't have any strong political values either way. Whereas now they have to ask more specific ones, and he deals very specifically in kind of the ethical management of your money. So it might be a case of, okay, how do you feel about child labour? And if you say, well, actually, I understand that economically it's a necessity, he's not allowed to react to that. He can't be like, well, I think you're a horrible human being. But it's just to get you to think about those kind of individual things. And I definitely had a point that was related to taking stuff. That was it. So he was also then talking about like charities taking money from things that you shouldn't take money from. So the idea that he worked with a charity where they had an opportunity to have money donated from a company who make arms, and he was like, that might seem like a great idea to take on this investment, but you're a charity, so how is that going to look? And it's like, fundamentally, the British Library is funded by a lot of really bad stuff. So even on the basis of that, and just the fact that that we've taken your stuff and it's being funded by stuff that it's all those kind of things. It's all just a bit, oh hey, we've actually got people from Rome, so that's exciting. But I find the ethics of that really interesting. But that was it. So when he was talking about the child labour stuff, obviously our first reaction is no, child labour is awful. And it's like, okay, well, what was the last item you bought from Primark? Because it's a well-known fact that they use like child labour. But fundamentally, if you're in the rain and you need an umbrella and Primark is there and it's £1, are you going to then be like, well, no, I'm like, you then have to make those other choices as you go, kind of thing. So it's one of those things where like it's a spectrum, and empathy is a muscle. I will say this until I die. Empathy is a muscle that you have to practice using. It's not necessarily going to be your first response is your most empathetic one. So you have to kind of train yourself to be like, no, this is the way to do it, kind of thing. So but no, it's all fascinating. But I think they need to give the stuff back. Give it back.
It's just, I don't know. It is that whole, somebody's at my door. Sorry.
No, you go right ahead. I'll tell you what, whilst she's doing that, should we do 15 minutes of actual reading, seeing as we've only got 20 minutes left and we've done no reading. Karis, I can confirm that the last 2 lives I've done without you, there's been no reading done. You're the only person I've done a live with any reading at all. So we'll do from 58 because that's when it's now. We're at 20 minutes. That'll keep us entertained, and I don't have to just talk at you guys because that would be weird. I don't know what book I'm going to read because I didn't get Ashley to pick one, so we're just going to go with one that I've started. So we're going to go with Get a Life, Chloe Brown. So we already started that one. So I'm reading a romance, and the two main characters literally just bumped into each other, and I'm finding it very amusing.
Nice. I'll show you what came in the mail when we've stopped reading.
No, you go ahead and interrupt me. I don't mind. I'm just I wasn't sure how long you. I thought if it was something you needed to talk to or anything important, I'll put 20 minutes up anyway, just in case. And as I have said on many a live, if people want to mute me, you go right ahead.
No, so my uni book arrived, and it's relevant because we have collected ancient Greek novels.
Nice.
Yeah.
I can see why I was like, that is going to be huge.
Yep, this is my uni reading for November.
For November?
It's not even all of them.
That's nuts. That's huge. It's not even got like a stunning cover. That is, we're here to be academic now.
We are definitely here to be academic.
Have you got to like annotate it and stuff, or have you just got to read it?
I don't even know. I've tried looking at, because I have like the week by week breakdown, and at the minute, to me, it's all just nonsense because it's just lots of ancient Greek names and stuff, and I'm like, that means nothing to me. I don't know what that is. So yeah, I've got to read everything that's in here. Over 800 pages. And more.
Wow.
I filmed my November TBR yesterday, and the entire thing is just me like doing the whole you either laugh or you cry thing, because I'm just like, ah! Because not only have I got this, but I also have, spoilers for my November TBR, a 900-page fantasy book for a read long, and then Tolkien for a read long, and I'm like, oh, that hurts.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
So,
oh no. No, couldn't.
Since it's relevant, since we were talking about ancient Greek stuff.
That is terrifying. That's scarier than all of the books that I've read so far. That's nuts. Because I'm filming my TBR today, and I've just made a whole bunch more of my TBR cards. So they're all sat here. But so I've got all of those. I've got some that I need to finish making. So I've got 100 new ones there. And then I'm also bringing in wild cards, which I'm particularly proud of. But I made wild cards essentially because I made the cards too small to begin with. So they're not much smaller, but they're smaller enough that I'm like, no, I need to start again. But these are going to be punishments because I'm really bad for being like, oh, I'm going to pick out one of these books and I'm definitely going to read these books this month. And then going, I've spotted something shiny over there, so I'm going to read that instead, and then not reading these. So we're incorporating wild cards. If I don't read my TBR cards, we're getting a wild card next month. And some of the prompts that people have suggested for the wild cards are brutal. So it's like things like reading a celebrity autobiography, and yeah.
I hate autobiographies so much.
I don't mind an autobiography if the person is interesting, but if it's Katie Price, for example, I don't care. I don't care. So it's things like that it's like, well, it's obviously a punishment to encourage me to read, but obviously it's just a prompt rather than a specific book. So I might be able to I could probably get away with reading like a comedian's memoir because they usually have quite interesting lives. But yeah, and then a bit like things like that, and then a book by an author that you've already dismissed. So like, no, I didn't like their stuff, but I'm going to try again anyway, apparently. So I've got to film that today. And I just really hope it's gentle with me because October has been a lot. Like trying to get as many books read as possible has been intense. And I really didn't appreciate that hosting an online event would be like a full-time job, like maintaining everything. So that's a lesson I learned.
Yep, it's a readathon is a lot of work. I have done. I'm not doing well with my October TBR. I'll look it over there because I've got my book cart thing, but I definitely will not be finishing them all, which makes me sad because I do really, really want to read them, but then like I need to start reading this thing as soon as possible. So
no, that's smart to just dig deep into that, I think. But yeah, like I mean, out of what I started with, I have all of these left. And I'm like, one's in here that I'm like, oh, these were highly anticipated. I know I'm going to really enjoy the Shadow and Bone series, and I've got the whole series, so I want to crack on with that so I can then read the rest. But I decided to go with the unnecessarily large books first. So these are the ones that I have read. Ignore the packet of chocolate. This physique takes work. It takes having chocolate everywhere you look. So like all the hefty ones, but like I didn't enjoy this one. Yo Nesbo was just boring. I really didn't enjoy that one. But obviously it took me 3 weeks to get through because it's huge. And I was just like, that wasn't scary or interesting at all. So why did I waste all of my time on that? And the two that were my kind of, I knew I was going to really enjoy them, I read those first, which was a rookie mistake. So
because my thing was I had a few similar themed books, so I've been trying to spread them out, but now that I took longer than I thought with 2 of them that I was reading at the same time, like it ended up being that I hadn't finished anything until like the 15th, 16th, and then this week I finished like 3 books in a row because I just came to the end of all of them. But they were quite big. Like I was reading these Violent Delights and Once and Future Witches at the same time, which are like 400 and 500 pages. So then I've got stuff like The Year of the Witching, which I still haven't read, but I didn't want to start until I'd finished Once and Future Witches because too many witches.
Too many witches.
I have Funny, which I want to read because that was a Patreon pick, but I didn't want to read that while reading these Violent Delights because that's academia. I was just like, there's too many similarities. I need to spread these out.
Yeah.
But I need to start reading The Fellowship of the Ring because of Talking Along, and I've got 1 week left of October, and then I'm reading this because of course I am.
Of course you are. I'm surprised that's you even waited, to be honest.
The thing is, I haven't been reading much this week, so even though like it should have worked out perfectly, like me getting one of my most anticipated books ever in my week off, I'm not even 100 pages into this yet. Because I've been on the booktube grind. Yesterday I filmed 4 videos, edited 2. So it's like that is
a grind. That's incredible. You're so like, so we were texting each other the other day, and I said that obviously I've got plans for video ideas all the way up to March now because I came up with like 4 more and was like, oh yeah, I'll just like put them. So I've got like a little timetable thing that I've set myself. Have I recorded any of them? No. We're gonna try and do that today. Whereas yeah, we said if we put like my ideas, your work ethic together, we'd be unstoppable.
Yeah. But the thing is, I kind of have to be because this is going to be my November.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
As soon as I saw this bad boy, I was like, oh, I'm going to pre-film.
Yeah, that's smart. I think there's the thing, so like obviously I work from home, so my rationale is that I will film and edit and stuff as like it's a hobby. I enjoy doing this, I enjoy doing that, but I am too competitive with myself because I'm like, well no, I still need to be recording this many videos a week. Like the only video I have posted in October that has not been alive has been my TBR video. That's it. Like I've not posted anything else, and I've been tagged in 4 separate tag videos in the last 4 weeks. So I'm like, right, those are the ones that we're going to do then. People will just have to deal with the fact that for a while it's just going to be a lot of tags. I can sit still and talk about those, and I'm very excited. And I like doing a tag because you just get to sit and talk about books that you don't have an opportunity to talk about very often. So, but yeah, I was just like, I have all these really cool ideas. Like I want to do one video where I look at all the books that I own because I'm a writer. So either writers have recommended them to me or because people think that I will need it because I'm a writer. So like the How to Build Your Novel books and things like that, but also like Stephen King on writing. Books that you will definitely own either if you're a hobbyist or because people are like, you need this. I really want to do that. That's one of the ones that are on my wish list. Things like that I'm just like, I get to just sit here and talk about books that I don't get to talk about very often. That's the dream.
Because I feel like a lot of my content is just bare basic stuff, basically. And then, like, I've got videos planned almost until the end of the year. I think there's 1 week missing. One. I'm hoping that one will just miraculously appear in the book. But then all of a sudden, like, one will hit, very rarely, but one will hit, and I'll be like, even though I've got stuff pre-filmed, we're going to do this one instead. So that's what happened with the Witchy one that I uploaded yesterday. That wasn't meant to happen. It was meant to be a big book TBR, which has now been moved to November because obviously, like, normally I would just push it a week back or something, but we're about to hit all the wrap-ups and book hauls and TBRs and stuff. So, yeah, the Witchy one just came out of the blue. And I was quite happy about that one because I was just like, normally it is pretty standard stuff I do, whereas this one seemed a little bit different, and I got to dress up as a witch. So
I think I'm so excited. It's in my to watch later because when you uploaded it, I was in the mood for reading, so I was like, I'm saving that for later. But like the whole aesthetic of it, when you did the kind of the Fae one, and you've obviously done my complete collection of Greek myths and stuff like that, it's those videos that I absolutely love because you can see when creators make videos like this is my genre. Like I love like witchy things like that, aesthetic things like that. Like it's such a joy to watch because it was obviously a joy to make, and like you can see I love stuff like that. When those ideas go, no, this is more important, that's going to be a good video when it just comes out because it doesn't feel forced. You're not sat there being like, oh well, I've got to film today. It's like, I want to film this now. Those are cool to watch. I'm excited to watch it.
I did a little introduction beforehand, like a little atmospheric thingy. And I really like making those. Like I like doing them in my B-roll for my weekly vlogs. And I was just kind of, it's almost a challenge to look around my room and be like, what says witch? How can I make this look like a witch is like you've just walked into a witch's home? Like how do I do this? And I was just like, get all the candles. We have to have all of the candles. And then I was annoyed because I've actually just ordered my first tarot deck, which I'm very excited about. And it arrived yesterday, but this was after I filmed, so I was just like, I could have done with a tarot deck like right now. But then I realized Fairy Loot do the character tarot cards, and I do have some of them, so I was just like, I don't have a full deck, but we have enough for a video.
I was gonna say, I thought you had, like, when you said, "Oh, I'm excited for my new tarot deck," I was like, I thought you had one, but obviously it's the Fairy Loot one. Yeah, because I've seen the reel. Obviously, I was on that straight away. I thought that was fantastic. But yeah, no, it's really interesting because there's a few of my friends that have really gotten into like the tarot stuff recently. And one thing that I thought was really, really lovely is someone said, like, you'll discover tarot when tarot is ready for you to discover it. And I was like, I just love that as like a little witchy, that you've been accepted. I think there's something quite like warm, but I know obviously it's got a lot of spooky, dark, don't mess with this magic kind of vibe to it as well. But just I think anything that's kind of like, yeah, when you're ready, it will be there kind of thing. I like that. But no, I thought the aesthetic of that video was just stunning. But the thing is, I like a bit of orange. I'm a massive fan of like orange and yellows and things like that. And this is such the perfect time for those colours. So everyone's Instagram at the moment is just stunning because they're all using that same like Amsterdam filter that brings out the oranges and stuff. Oh, it looks great. Love it.
Literally, like, I got a pumpkin for the first time ever, and I was like, this will be in everything I film from now on. I've got
little munchkin pumpkins somewhere. I think I've got them over. So I've got this little shelf unit that's a coffin shape, and I've had it for about 2 years, and I get it out every time this year and just put it. I'm like, it's strange to have it like in spring and then just like have it, because it's the only really like gothic-y thing that I've got, or goth thing that I've got. But I like getting it out. But I've got like 3 little like munchkin pumpkins, and I can see it. But there's no point me turning the whole thing around, because then you'll see what a mess my room is.
No, I don't really have Halloween decorations besides the pumpkin, which is more, I mean, it will be decorations when I actually carve it.
Yeah. The thing is, I think it's nice, like, you can, I don't know, there's just something about having like that additional pop of colour in photos and videos and things that is just so aesthetic, and it's such an iconic shape. Like, even though they come in different shapes and sizes and things, you know, you can get like the green gourds and people paint them white and black and all sorts. There is just something very familiar about it. And I just love this time of year. I never used to be like a massive fan of Halloween, but since going to uni, Halloween has kind of become my favourite holiday. I do like Christmas, but I like a quiet Christmas. I'm not one for big parties on Christmas. I like, right, we're gonna have the roast dinner and stuff like that, but I have never not got a book for Christmas. So it tends to be my family sits and plays a board game, and then I'll read for the afternoon whilst my parents fall asleep and my brothers fight or chat or whatever, like play on their Xbox games or whatever it is. And that's, so it's we've always had quite chilled Christmases. I really like that. And I've never had a good New Year's Eve party. Like, I've never been to one that hasn't ended in absolute carnage. So yeah, so Halloween has kind of become that holiday that I really look forward to it. Yeah, it's just nice.
I'm definitely the same. I've always felt Halloween, I feel like, is the only way I can describe it. Like, I just feel an atmosphere, and I'm just like, this is the time for all of the ghost stories and everything that I love so much. And because, like, I've always been interested in the witchy stuff and whatever, and I don't know, I'm still a bit like about it, but I am kind of delving into that, because a lot of it isn't actually like, as much as it seems very like, oh, magic, ooh, a lot of it is down to just nature and like your own self-reflection, I guess.
Yeah,
being in tune with yourself. Like, tarot reading is actually just a lot of interpretation. It's not like, oh, I'm seeing your future. Which it's just kind of makes you think about whatever. It's almost like the prompts, and it's just
yeah, it's a process of information, isn't it, essentially? Because you're going to pull a card and you'll be like, oh, that's, I find that with astrology, so I don't necessarily think that I'm going to be able to predict my future or my personality from it. Sometimes I do. Sometimes when I do something, I'm like, right, that's the Virgo rising in me that has just decided to have a manic moment. But I do think that it's a prompt to like, oh, well, I need to reflect on this thing in particular. So if I'm having, I always remember there was a moment where I kind of just stumbled across my horoscope for a month, and I was having a really hard time at work. And it was just a case of, oh, your creative career is about to take off in a new direction. And I was like, well, I don't have a creative career, but I would like a creative career. And it kind of then just kind of like, and then it spurns that idea. But for tarot, I remember a friend of mine at uni, she had a Romanian grandmother who had given her tarot cards. So they were very, very important to her. And the whole process of doing tarot was very, very important to her, especially at a house party. She'd love getting them at a house party. And she did a classic one where you just kind of like, you put your hand over it and you find the one that's warm. And my friend did it, and she pulled out a card and she kind of interpreted it, and it was a case of she was having an issue with her boyfriend, but that was going to get itself settled and all this sort of stuff, like all positive stuff. And two of my other friends did it, and then I went last. And I wasn't skeptical. I was just the only sober person at a house party. So it was just that kind of like mindset. And I put my hand over it, and I didn't feel anything. Like I didn't feel any warmth at all. And I was there for way longer than everyone else. And eventually I just picked a card because I was like, I just want this to be over now. And she was like, oh, that's not. And then basically told me that this tarot was going to be that I was going to be single forever. And I was like, oh, cool. All right. And then 10 years later, she was right. I'm still single. I'm like, oh, she was onto something there. But it was just really, really bizarre that it was just like, that was kind of my first. And I was like, I don't think that's how this works, but I'm not going to say anything to you. And then, yeah, it just became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I was like, well, that one tarot card, that one time 10 years ago, live by it.
It is interesting seeing how it works, because there are just some things which are a fluke, and then the rest of it, I don't know. But I know I actually, because you can do it like via videos and stuff. And there was one that I watched just out of intrigue because somebody was like trying it for the first time, and it was actually an ASMR video. So I just put it on because I like listening to people talk, and it's just the vibe. And there was like one thing that hit, and I was like, oh, I did not expect this. I don't want to hear it. It is the thing where it just kind of, it's like a reminder, or like it is the reflection part of things, because this was, it was, I can't remember what card it was, but it was reversed, so it seems bad when you first look at it. But it was like, no, actually, this is more telling you to like let go of self-doubt and stuff, and like get rid of something, rather than like, this is bad. And it like just hit the exact tune that I needed, because like for the past week, I guess, I've been kind of in a mental panic about uni and if I've overestimated myself, because I'm going to be doing my normal job, YouTube as a job, and also a part-time master's degree with this fucking thing. And I'm just like, have I overestimated myself this time?
You haven't. I can tell you now, you absolutely haven't. You haven't, absolutely haven't. Because I think a master's is a fascinating experience, but you are so much more prepared for it than you are for an undergrad. And you've done it, and you got a first in your undergrad, didn't you? There you go. You've got nothing to worry about. It's you've absolutely smashed it once before, and like as an undergrad, all of it is a new experience. Going to lectures and being in control of your own self and your work ethic and all those things, that's all new. And if you go away to uni as well, that's all new. There's nothing new about this. The subject is going to be new. The subject will be difficult. If it was easy, it wouldn't be worth it. There is absolutely nothing stopping you. You're going to absolutely smash it.
I think it's just because as well I got very overwhelmed, like just knowing that my work days are going to go from like 9 until probably 9 p.m. So I'm going to have like 12-hour work days, because I'll do my normal work day and then either uni or YouTube in the evenings.
Maybe that's why your body is like keeping you up until 3 a.m. It's emotionally preparing you for being like, well, you're still going to need 5 hours to just chill out afterwards.
Yeah. So I think it's all just been like very, oh no, what have I done? And then like that tarot reading just went straight for it and was like, no,
I love that. No, that's fantastic.
It was exactly what I needed to hear, and I'm just like, even if it is like, if there's nothing behind this and it's all just fake, so to speak, is it though? Because it's just giving me exactly what I needed. So where's the harm?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's almost like a holistic therapy, isn't it, in that sense? Because it's a case of, even if it's just a case of you're reflecting on something, and I mean, I overanalyze everything anyway, so it doesn't take a lot for someone to say, like, someone can make like a really passive comment like about something, and I'm going to think about that for days. And I feel like with stuff like that, it's nice to kind of go, okay, but have you considered this option that is slightly less traumatic than that one you're fixated on, and just kind of like go with that. And I think, yeah, sometimes you need those little signs, or you want to know that there is something out there kind of looking out for you. I don't think there's any harm in that. I think the harm comes when people try and force it on you, or try and tell you how to use this particular tool, but then that's because they're being a tool, so that's not on you. But no, I'm excited, and I haven't seen anyone that has a tarot deck arrive recently that hasn't been made happier for it, so I hope you very much enjoy it. I think it'd be great.
I haven't opened it like from its actual packaging yet, because it came yesterday, and like I said, I was on the YouTube grind, so I was like, I'm gonna get so distracted if I open this right now. But it's all mythology themed, because of course it is. Well, just to really solidify the fact that I like nature, it's called Dreams of Gaia, who is the earth, the literal earth.
I'm going to Google it and see if I can find some photos, because I want to see. I don't want you to have to open it just for the sake of it, just because I'm being nosy.
No, it's I'll send you photos through when I open it, because I'll end up opening it. But oh my goodness, it is.
Oh wow. Yeah, I googled it. They're stunning. Joy. Oh, they are beautiful. There are some where I just think the artwork, I mean, my friend Anna, she is an art graduate. She works in games development. She has just created some tarot-based enamel pins, and she set up a Kickstarter for them, and they are stunning, which I'm not surprised. She's a BAFTA award-winning artist, so I would expect nothing less, but they are absolutely beautiful. And I've just been sharing them everywhere, because I can't afford such a pin yet, but
I saw that you'd shared them, and I was just like, tarot.
yeah, exactly. They are stunning. They are absolutely stunning. So she's got 4 designs at the moment, obviously, which you've seen. So they're so pretty. They're so pretty. I'm excited for her to. She's going to do really well with that. When I first set up my business as a ghostwriter, she was my business partner, because I needed to have 3 people as part of my business. And originally we were going to do it where I was going to do writing workshops and she was going to do artist workshops. And then she got a really good job in London and was like, I'm going to have to go and do this. And I was like, I understand, that's fine. So I went into teaching instead. But she's just done so well, and I'm so proud of her for doing this. And they look great. They look great. So no, it's cool. Right, well, I've had your attention for 2 hours, so I don't know if you need to skedaddle or whatever. I would completely understand if you do. We've done no reading. I read half a page.
More than I did.
Yeah, but you had stuff at the door. You had stuff to do. You had scary books to let in.
Oh, I just keep looking at it like, why?
It's huge. Like, that's a doorstop of a book, isn't it?
I only know one of the texts. Like, I've only heard of one of them before, and I'm like, cool.
Intense. And the thing is, like, yeah, it would be fascinating, because then you'll start to see. I find whenever I study a new collection of stories or whatever, especially when they're historical or things like that, is then you can't unsee elements of it in other fiction that you're going to read. So now you've just opened up this whole world to yourself of being like, oh, that's from this. So that's exciting.
Like, I have to stop myself in my videos from like going down literary analysis routes, which I think it came through in a book haul that I filmed, because I got a non-fiction book called Pandora's Jar, and it's quite literally just, talking about the women in Greek mythology. And I started going on this big tangent about things I'd seen on Twitter from the author, because she's been doing these videos, and she makes a point in one of the most recent ones I've seen of showing how any Greek myth, like recounting, let's say, not a retelling, because that makes recountings of Greek mythology, like the collections of Greek myths, as much as the author will want to say, like, I can a completely neutral thing. Not possible. It is literally impossible, because even if you think that you're giving a neutral perspective, even just what you're interested in and what you deem important to the story and the parts you tell or the parts that you don't tell reflects your own biases. And it was just, it's one of those things where I do see it everywhere, because people are just like, for instance, when people are sent books to review and they're just like, this doesn't, I don't know, like, there's a whole argument about people being paid for reviews and people not trusting that because it makes it biased. And I'm like, you can't have a non-biased review.
Non-bias doesn't exist. Yeah.
It does not exist.
No. You can explain where your bias comes from. So you can be like, well, I've read from this author before and loved them, so I'm fully expecting or I love this genre, so I'm fully expecting. Like, I posted one literally yesterday, because I was part of a blog tour for Anna Ellery's The Puzzle Women, and I loved it. But I went to uni with Anna, so I had already seen snippets of it because she'd workshopped it with us. I then got The Rabbit Girls, which she published last year, and had never read that but knew I was going to love it anyway. I was like, this is going to be completely biased, and obviously so, because I'm just going to be like, you should read this book, it's amazing, and then kind of like give you a brief overview as to why I think it's amazing and what I thought were the kind of poignant takeaways. Because I always try and do, if I do a written review, I do the first 3 chapters. My thought process being, if you can make it to the 3rd chapter and keep my interest, then yeah, you can have my time and my money. And an agent is exactly the same. When you're publishing a book, if they're not interested in the book at the first 3 chapters, that's it, they're not interested. So I always give it, and then I do my review on the first 3 chapters, because then it also means there aren't going to be any spoilers for how it ends. And I can obviously say I liked the ending or I didn't like the ending, but if I focus it on those 3 chapters, there's no harm in me telling you what happens. So, for example, in this book, it's about a woman. It's very trigger warning for domestic abuse, but essentially the main character is a woman in the 90s in Berlin who runs away from her husband and tries to smuggle the kids out with her, and it doesn't go to plan. Something goes horribly wrong, and then it cuts to 10 years later where the kids are still living with the father, but you don't know what's happened with the mum, and the Stasi are involved, and she sends, basically they receive a notebook from her, and their dad just tears it up and throws it in the bin, but they then rescue it from the bin and find these puzzle women who used to work against the Stasi, kind of putting together documents that the Stasi had tried to destroy. So they then try and put the book back together because they need to know this part of their story. They were too young to remember what happened, and they just need the truth of what happened to their mum, because obviously they still live under this domineering police officer's house who is abusive, who is manipulative, who is cruel, and they just need that other part of themselves. And it is heartbreaking, this story, but it's so good. And it's just, yeah, but like you said, you can't go in and not be biased. So the first sentence is, by the way, I know this woman.
One of the I reviewed a book which again is a Greek myth recounting collection thing, called Zeus is a Dick. And oh my god, that review was a ride, because within 7 pages of the introduction, I ended up with like almost a page worth of notes, because I was just like, all of my literary studies are kicking in to be like, you can't say that. Because what she'd basically done is retell the myth, but like from a humorous point of view, as you could tell from the title being Zeus the Dick. And like, fair enough, do that. But she said something along the lines of, we're doing this as the Greeks intended, or we're making this, we're telling it from a funny point of view because this is what the ancient Greeks intended. And I was like, nope. You can't. Nope. That just doesn't exist. One, it's a very bold claim to say that you know exactly what an ancient civilization intended. 2, they've been retold so many times that there is no one intention. And it's just been drilled into me in every single essay that I've ever written. You cannot say what an author intended, because there is no way to prove that. So it's just like instantly alarm bells ringing. Like, nope.
You can say that my interpretation of this is, or like, because I really like any modern Medusa retelling where they give her some agency, and the idea, and like there was one that was perfect, that was like, yeah, was it Artemis that turned, I can't remember if it's Artemis or someone, I'm forgetting now, you'll know better than I do, but whichever goddess turned her into the monster, Athena, that was it. The wisest of the goddesses, like literally, of like, yes, she was the one that was like, yes, you need to be punished for being attacked. It makes more sense for a modern audience to be like, well, actually, she's giving her a way of defending herself. Men are never going to attack her again. Like, and that, especially because she was raised with monsters. She was a Gorgon, but she was human. Like, it's just, yeah, I just find that whole thing fascinating. But again, you can say from a my perspective is, and that my perspective is based on these factors. So like, for example, I have a real issue. I won't read my Vanessa, my last Vanessa, I can't remember what it's called, because going to a girls' school, there were quite a few girls that, as we grew up, I know that were sexually assaulted or were groomed by men in their lives. I can't deal with that, and I never realised it was really an issue until I had to study Lolita during my masters, and we were doing love story. And obviously the lecturer was like, this is not a romance. Like, this isn't, they live happily ever after. But it's, I mean, it kind of leads into why my anthology is a collection of love stories. They're not romance, they're love stories, and it's different facets of love. And the idea that this is obviously a very toxic position. I didn't realize how badly that book was going to trigger me. And I was like, I've never been triggered. I've never been one of those people that goes, oh, I need trigger warnings. But I just cannot read books like that, because although the experience wasn't necessarily mine, the fact that it happened at such a formative age, it still has an impact on me. And it's just things like that, that my perspective of that, there's no way I'd be able to give my, like, the Vanessa book, I can't remember what it's called, I think it's My Last Vanessa or My Red Vanessa or something like that. That's it. You're so much better at this than I am. I know that I would never be able to give it an honest review, because I'd never be able to see past that trauma. So I just won't read it, because I don't want to be like, oh yeah, it was crap, because that's, it's not the book, it's me. And even when I've said I don't like a book, I tend to say that it's because of stuff like Truth Witch that I read in January. I had just read Serpent and Dove, and I really, really disliked Serpent and Dove, and then Truth Witch really reminded me of it, and I was like, that's it, I've killed a series by reading them so close to each other. And because one reminds me of the other, and I know it's nothing to do with the book, I'm sure the book is great, I'm sure both of those books are fine, they're not for me. And it's just making sure that when you do those reviews, you say, by the way, this is just my opinion, as opposed to, but yeah, but I don't know, I've never been paid for a review. I got paid to talk about some bed sheets once, that's about it.
It was interesting though that you mentioned the Medusa myth as like an example, because that was again one of the problems that I had with this book. I'd basically just given you my review.
No, please do.
But it was really, because it was trying to approach it with this humorous aspect, it was making everything more lighthearted, and that itself made me uncomfortable, because I was just like, there is a lot of sexual assault in these stories, and it basically was just like, oops, he's at it again. And I'm just like, that is not how you approach these. But because it's written nowadays, it was trying to, like, it was calling stories out, and it did use the Medusa example to be like, this has been presented wrong, and, you know, Athena turning her into a monster is not what you meant to do. And did the whole thing where it's like, oh no, Athena's defense was that she was doing it so that Medusa can then defend herself, and was going down all this route. And I was like, that's all very well and good, but it also presented the Hades and Persephone story as a romance, which is the glamorized version, because in ancient texts there have been so many, like, it's not, it's just not good, basically. And there are so many arguments about that story. And I'm just like, I don't mind reading a romantic, like a glamorized, romanticized version of it, because that's just a retelling, it's a version of, but not in collections. It threw me off. I'm just like, this has never been presented this way. In the ancient texts. And then there was lots of instances of like sexual coercion. So like eventually they would agree to doing the sexual act, but it would be very much a manipulation game, and it was quite literally presented as a fun game, and it was just like, fine, I'll give in eventually. And like that wasn't mentioned, and I was just like, I'm just confused about the stance on this, because it's calling out some stuff romanticized in other instances, not really saying anything about the courage. So I'm just like, I'm confused about what this is.
There needs to be some consistency there, because it was one of the ones when I watched your TBR, I made a note of it because I was like, it looks really good, and I assumed from the title that it would be calling out the behaviour and kind of, okay, from these stories, what would we consider acceptable and what do we not consider acceptable? And I think the Hades and Persephone story has been made more palatable for a modern audience, where, you know, the idea, especially like the Lore Olympus version of it, which is my favourite Hades and Persephone story, but it has been made into this where she's got an overbearing mother and she's got power in her own right and it's her choice and all these sorts of things, is a far more palatable and charming version of the story, because the story is, like you said, that's not how in the original tales, that's not how it's done at all. But in the same way that over generations, Hades has almost been made the most palatable of the three, of him, Poseidon, and Zeus. He's the one he raped the least, so we'll go with that kind of version. I think that in itself is quite interesting. So I'm quite disappointed, because I was kind of hoping they would, in the sense of calling him a dick, be calling out, okay, well, this is unacceptable, or this would be different now, or we might interpret it this way. I thought it was going to be that kind of nonfiction as opposed to just like a jovial.
Yeah, it was really strange because, like I said, it did most of the time call it out, but I'm just like, but it's not consistent and makes it more lighthearted. So it's just not really like it's calling out, but in a way where it's like, is that it again? And I'm like,
no, we're past that now. We're at the point of like, okay, not only are we calling out, but we're saying flat out, this is not acceptable.
Yeah, and I'm like, if you wanted to make a collection of Greek mythology that's like silly, basically, and it's a funny side of things, there are so many instances of like just people randomly changing into animals and like really random things happening that could have been used instead, but instead it goes for all of the like lol, and then he had 6 kids. Just like, but how did you get there? Because that part is not funny.
yeah. I mean, like, I find that with original fairy tales as well. The idea that Sleeping Beauty wasn't awoken with a true love's kiss, but during labour. Labour is what woke her. Like, that is just, so messed up. Messed up. But then I know that fairy tales, when they were first told, much like with the Greek Greek original stories, they weren't bedtime stories that we have them as now. They were moral warnings, because they didn't have the church as such. They would have these like, don't be an idiot, something bad will happen, those moral kind of lessons instead. But,
it's interesting because I studied fairy tales as part of like a children's literature thing in uni, and like just seeing the progression, because like, you have the fairy tales and they are really dark, really, really dark. So it amuses me when people are just like, it's a dark fairy tale retelling. Trust me, the original will still be darker. But the versions that we have things like Disney based off is actually Victorian fairy tales, because that's when all the moral compasses came in, and that's where they took the stories to be like, and that is why you shouldn't walk off into the woodland by yourself at night. And it very much makes it more of the airy fairy type, where it's just like, and then she went stupid enough to do this thing, and this is why you don't do it. So quite often the ones that we've read are from a later version of it, but people see those as the original because it was the first time they were documented, like actually written down and published. I'm just like, they were not the originals. So yeah, it's really interesting. There's quite a lot of times on BookTube where I'm just like, okay, you need to separate what you know as a literature student from what like general people in the BookTube community know, because like I can't get annoyed from people being like, this is a dark fairy tale retelling, when it's darker. It's just
but for them it is a dark fairy tale retelling, because they're not used to reading fairy tales in that context. I did the most passive aggressive essay in my master's, where I studied historical fiction, because I was going to write a murder mystery set during the Tudor era, and I was going to focus on Sir Francis Bryan, who was a really close friend of Henry VIII's, and no one knows anything about him. They don't know where he died. They don't they think they know where he died, and they think they know parts of his life, but essentially he was an ambassador on behalf of Henry that got kicked out of court several times for being mischief maker, basically, and then he became a chief justice in his local area. So they have theories that he was like an assassin and all sorts of things, but no one, there are no portraits of him. No one knows anything about him. And I wrote it, so I wrote the opening chapter and then had it workshopped. And when I say I had it torn to pieces, like, I mean, this lecturer, she held nothing back. Like, she slated everything. And I very much write very, very quickly, and I write everything that I think I need to have in the story, and then I like to have it workshopped and then for people to go, well, you've mentioned on the last page that they were in a car. You didn't mention the car at the beginning. Can you let us know that they're in a car, like, earlier on, and things like that, and then like flesh it out that way. But I had really tried to make sure that everything you could possibly need for this historical fiction to really throw you into the world was in this opening chapter. And the one thing that she kept coming back to was the fact that the Tudors don't have chairs. The Tudors did not use chairs. They sat on stools or they sat on benches. They did not have chairs. And I was like, but you can literally go to any Tudor castle, and what do they have? Chairs. So I've done the research. Chairs did exist. Okay. So I then did my entire essay because she was adamant that chairs did not exist, and that is not what that's not the process of how a crime would have been managed or whatever it was, investigated. And so I wrote an essay on the Tiffany perspective, which is essentially the historians and anyone who kind of studies literature, their first issue is that their knowledge is not the same as their audience. And you will always have an audience member who knows more about the subject than you. And Tiffany is actually a medieval name. It comes from the 7th century. But if you were to write a 7th century set book and have a character called Tiffany, everyone would be like, why have you called your character Tiffany? That doesn't make any sense, because it feels like a far more modern name. And it's a lot of historical fiction writers tend to write in really broad strokes because that is just the easiest way to kind of make sure everything's okay and that you're not going to upset anyone. But I find it, like, even like my basic knowledge of history, I find that sometimes I'll watch a TV show and I'll be like, but that's not historically accurate. They wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have dressed like that. Like, I love a period drama, but I got 3 episodes into Reign and then had to stop, which was the MTV version. And I was like, why is she wearing Vera Wang? Why has she got chiffon on? Why is she having a bath in a metal bathtub? What are you doing? Stuff like that.
I like so Samantha Shannon, she goes really deep into her etymology and stuff, and I will always remember, I don't know why, it's just one of those things that I found really amusing, but I think it was for Priory? I think it was for Priory. She ended up making last minute edits. Like, she literally begged her editor to make this change, like not even long before it went to print, because she happened to think, like, she'd used the word campfire basically, and she was like, when did campfires become a thing? And even though it's not a direct, like, historically written world, because it's inspired by the period of history, she just deep dive into that, and she realized that campfires were invented after, or like the word for campfire was logged after the time period she was inspired by. So she was like, I need to just change it to fire. And she edited it to just get rid of the word campfire. And I was like, that's such a small thing that you wouldn't even think about. Just like, when
but someone will read it and go, well, it was inspired by such and such. And
I wouldn't even be like know where to begin with that, because I'm not too good at history. When I approach history, like, I quite literally failed history exams at A level. I just, granted, the entire class did, so I think that was more of a teacher thing. But
that's definitely a teacher thing, yeah.
I just, as much as I find history fascinating, I like the stories. I don't remember dates or specifics. I wouldn't be able to tell you like Henry's wives' names and stuff like that. I'm really bad at details, but I just love the stories behind stuff. So, like, I would just be so bad for details and knowing when, like, thinking, like, when did a campfire come into the dictionary?
Yeah. Well, I'm quite good at, so I use Etymon Online because it's just the easiest way to kind of, like, the starting point before you kind of look up like the rest of the history of stuff. But I want to do a dark academia book, so some of the language that I've been looking at, I've been making sure it has Latin roots rather than Greek or Hebrew, because obviously I know that they stole from everything anyway, in the same way that English language does. But I was like, if I'm going to use this particular system for my magic, I want to make sure that I'm using language that is related to those things. So essentially, I made a stupid tweet about it, and then I was like, oh no, that's actually a really good idea. And I've just started like playing with this idea. I haven't probably started writing it yet, but essentially a kind of Harry Potter magic-y schools kind of story, but from the perspective of a trainee school teacher. So you're kind of just like taking it on, but I want her to be like a divination teacher. So then I was looking at all the different types of divination and the different words they have in Latin versus in their Greek heritage and things like that. And I was like, well, I want to stick with the Latin one because that's the style I want to use. So then trying to like actively avoid Greek words is really hard. Like making sure you're like, okay, well, if they're, you know, playing to this and stuff like that. But I think it's fascinating. I love the research part of writing a book. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to just be like, I have this idea, let's plan out the whole thing, and then let's go in on the details. So like the one that I'm currently querying is a werewolf book, and I didn't want my werewolves to be like everyone else's, where they're big and hairy and scary and violent and stuff like that. So they're very militarized and everything they do is formulaic, but I wanted to lean into this like pack mentality thing, the idea that wolves don't talk to each other, but they still have means of communication, and they kind of share this like hive mind sort of thing and work together. And they work with crows and ravens, which I didn't realize. So they will have like, they'll work with ravens who will like fly ahead and kind of show them where the elk is, and then they'll hunt the elk, and then they will share their food with the raven, and wolves will train ravens to help them hunt. And I was like, that's fascinating. So I wanted to like incorporate that detail in, and yeah, just stuff like that. I'm a nerd. I like to do the research.
The research stuff is always the fun part, because it's just like, oh my god, this is so interesting. Then you end up on like 5 different tangents of just things that are really interesting.
Yeah.
I know this is going to happen when it comes to me writing my essays, and I'm just like, ancient Greek stuff, and then I'm like, but you need to write about this specific thing.
I'm like, no, but
yeah, it's just, I don't know, research.
No, yeah, it's nice to find like-minded people, because I think a lot of my in real life friends, as opposed to my internet-based friends, they just work their jobs and they work up their ladder and stuff like that. They've kind of done the uni bit now, and that's that. Whereas the uni friends and internet friends, I love that shared knowledge and like shared experience in finding out new things. It's just fascinating. I just love that so much.
I did have a friend once, not even that long ago, I think it was at the start of the year, who, like, she basically said, you know, like, just there's one lines about you and it just sticks with you and like hits you in the soul. And I'm like, I love that. She literally said that even though I'm not a writer, so to speak, and I don't, like, I always just say I'm a reader, I'm not interested in writing my own story. She was just like, you say that, but you're very much a storyteller. You adopt all of these stories, and there's so many times in conversation where like I'll just start being like, oh well, there's a story behind this, and I'll just go into storyteller mode and explain everything. Like, how many times during this live show have I gone like, oh well, there's a story about like this park over there, and
yeah, but I think it's almost a lost art. Like when you find someone that is a storyteller but isn't a writer, they are an absolute gem to have around, because those conversations are going to run half an hour longer than you're expecting them to, you know, like you're never going to have a bad time, because they're always going to have something that they can contribute outside of themselves. Like I always worry, and I've even done it just now, I always worry that I start sentences with I too often, that every experience is related to me, so I'm only able to provide certain stuff. Whereas I think if you have that storytelling ability to make even something that can seem incredibly mundane fascinating by the way that you tell it, that is a skill, that is an absolute talent. That and I think she's right, this friend. I think that's probably what makes you such an interesting content creator, because it is the stories of stuff, it's not necessarily the details. And I don't think sometimes, I mean that might be a benefit really, because if you give away too many of the details, then people aren't going to come back and say, oh, she spoiled it for me. Whereas if you're like, well, here's the general gist of the story, and here's the emotion that it's going to make you feel, and here's like, and because you can see it on your face, and I think those are all facets of storytelling. So there's a friend of mine called Kirsty who is a writer, but she does live storytelling. So she will go to almost like open mic night sort of thing, and she'll just tell you a story, and it won't necessarily be one that she's planned. She knows the general gist of it, but she'll have this idea, and she will just kind of wrap you up in a story, and it's just like being like wrapped up in a warm hug. Like, it just, even if the story is really dark, like a lot of her stories end with people dying, but it's just this kind of like the process of it. I guess it's like with the tarot, it's a processing of information, and it's just a really nice way when you're listening to someone tell a story. I'm convinced that everyone has one story that they love to tell, that is either related to them or something close to them. So whenever I go on like a date or I meet new people, one of the first things I ask them, if it's getting to that awkward thing, is like, what is that one story that you have told so many times, but you love telling this story, and you love an excuse to get this story into a conversation? Because if you can hear them tell that story, you're going to, one, learn loads about them, and two, it just, the way when people tell a story, and it just, they look relaxed doing it. So yeah, and I think it's important. Your friend is right.
I don't know what my one story would be, because the stories that I just randomly tell don't tend to be my stories. It's just like, oh, there's a myth behind this or something. But no, it's just there was another thing as well where this was when I was quite a bit younger, actually. Might have been like 15 maybe. And it's another thing that's always stuck in my head. My dad, we were out walking at one point, and I just stopped to take a photo because it was like a woodland area. Always is. And I stopped to take a photo because I noticed that there was like 3 or 4 kind of like rudimentary steps going up into the woodland. And I just stopped and took a photo, and it was like, why? And I was like, because it looks like that leads to some kind of fairy realm or something. Like, it just, there's a story there. And he just like stopped and stared at me for a moment, and I was like, was I being? And this is, like, coming from my dad, this is one of those things that was like weirdly profound, and I was like, oh, okay. He was just like, you're one of those people who looks for all the small magics of the world. And I was just like, I like that. I because I do generally walk around and just picture everything more magical than it is, I guess, and make stories out of everything. And if I ever see steps going into some kind of woodland, I'm like, that leads to a fairy realm, or if there's a hole, it just leads somewhere. For instance, there was a time when, so my college was just down this, like, there was a main road and then another one directly intersecting it, and my college would be at the end of that one. But it wasn't quite the end of this road, but there wasn't really anything down there, so to speak. Like, there was just trees and stuff, like just general hilly landscape. But the road did continue, so I was like, I want to go and see what it's actually like. Turns out it's a Victorian graveyard. And we did not expect this at all. So we were walking around and just generally, like, because I wanted to know why it wasn't known. And it turns out most of the people who were buried there were from the Great Flood of Sheffield and all these different stories. But there was one, I remember it so clearly, there was one grave that was just, it had a giant hole. And I was like, something's come out of that. Instantly there's a story there, because I'm just like,
what is that?
Like, there's either been a grave digger or something's dug its way out. So I don't want to look down the hole and see if there's anything at the bottom. Because it quite literally was just like right next to the tombstone. And it was all really faded, so it was like really old.
Yeah, and you're like, no, don't like that.
Because you couldn't see the bottom of this hole, so I was like, I don't really want to shine a torch down there and see if I can see a skeleton or anything, because
no, not worth the risk.
And I'm just like, I know rationally that, like, probably an animal just dug, but instantly, without even thinking, I was just like, there's a story, there's something.
Yeah, there's something there. Yeah, that makes sense. No, that's cool. There's so my brother started going to uni, and on a Friday he's only in there for an hour and a half. So I've started going and just kind of like wandering around Canterbury, and I discovered this door that has a pentagram inside of like a 7-pointed star with like symbols all around it on this random door. Now I must have walked past this door 100 times because it's right next to the Marlow Theatre. And I was like, but because it's behind a tree, I've never seen that door before. And I took a photo of it because I was so convinced in my mind that I was going to go back the next week and the door was not going to be there. Like, I just had it in my head. I was like, this is a spooky door. And like, the paint isn't new. It's not like someone's just randomly graffitied it. Like, it's obviously been there a while. And I'm like, what is there? What is the other side of this door? What is going on? But yeah, spooky.
That is fascinating. And like, that's one of the things where I'd see it and be like, I need to know. I need to do a deep dive. I need to see if I can find any kind of story related to this, because it's just, even if it was a relatively new thing, I'm just like, but there's somebody who at least knows something about that symbol who put that there, and I want to know why.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is the thing. So, like, on the other side of it, it's part of King's School building, but I think it's got like I don't know if it's a graveyard, but it's certainly got like an old church bit behind it. And then you've got Beerling Hall, that's like the other side of it, which is open to the public usually, but isn't at the moment. And I'm like, is it just the car park the other side of that? I don't know, but I want to find out. So yeah, fascinating. But anyway, it's been nearly 3 hours now. I'm sure you've got places to be. We've got a couple of hours obviously before I see you again for Keris's live stream, which I'm very excited for. Have you sorted out all your opening lines to mess with Becca?
I have a stack of books down on the floor, ready and waiting for Becca.
I was so tempted. I was like, I'm not going to say anything because I was like, I wasn't part of that conversation. But I was so tempted to be like, all you need to do is go back and watch her video where she talks about all the books that she'd set herself as like a 2020. I must read these that she hasn't read. And I was like, just have all those opening lines.
Well, we have to do books that they have read, but I was trying to think of things that like would be a bit more obscure.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it's also as well like one big clue out of anything is going to be the fact that it's books that she's read that I own. So I'm just like, that gives you a big clue, because we have similar.
It's a small margin.
We have similar tastes, but only to some extent. So I'm just like, she's gonna know which sort of books that I have, and she's gonna remember and think like it's a book that I've read that you have.
Yeah, that's cool. I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be great. And then I'm doing the who is most likely out of fictional characters. So very similar to the Would You Rathers we did earlier. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited for that. But yeah, but anyway, people have got lunch to eat and stuff to do. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been really good fun. We've done no reading. It's been great.
What is reading?
I know. Well,
6 stories though, so.
True. Right, so I hope everyone has a good day and I will see you later.
Bye.